If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. While out in Dravania, Y'shtola and Cid get to see firsthand as a group of goblins activate a giant machine that is not a machine at all. It's actually a Primal. The two of them are still out there trying to learn more about the strange Primal when the Warrior of Light shows up. The goblins of Idleshire are worried because the Primal is big enough to crush their entire settlement, but Y'shtola shows up right on time to tell Slowfix to calm down. Did I mention how much I love the different goblin names? Y'shtola's glad that you're there because the situation is pretty serious. The shifting of the ether in the area proves that the big machine is in fact a Primal. The good news is it stopped moving when it had barely popped out of the river. The bad news is there's no telling when it will start moving again, or what it will do once it does. The other problem is the thing is draining the ether from the surrounding area very fast and will leave the area uninhabitable in a few days if it's not stopped. Slowfix definitely doesn't want that since the goblins all only recently found a place to call home. Y'shtola doesn't plan on letting them lose their home either, so the Scions of the Seventh Dawn are officially on the job. But since this mechanical Primal is so big, they can't just take over and deal with it alone. Attacking it will have to be done in two ways. Of course, there's the Warrior of Light's usual stabby stabby boom boom method, but Y'shtola also wants to try cutting off its ether supply by separating it from the land. For that, she plans on getting help from Master Matoya, which will of course take time because the old woman wouldn't rush to do anything even if the world was ending, which is why Y'shtola has Cid keeping an eye on the Primal. Since it is a machine, he'll probably be the best person to help you deal with it anyway. As expected, if the thing wakes up again, Y'shtola wants you to do everything you can to keep it away from Idleshire. With the plan made, Y'shtola heads off to talk to Matoya, while Slowfix sends the Warrior of Light to talk to Backrix, who should know where Cid is. You don't have to wait long to find Cid, because he shows up to talk to Backrix as soon as you get there. He knew the situation was bad, but once the Warrior of Light tells him just how fast the Primal is draining the land's ether, he realizes that it's way worse than he thought. From what he's learned from Backrix, it's very likely that the Illuminati are behind this. They know how to summon a Primal, and they're crazy enough to do it. Every story has some version of the Illuminati, and the group in Final Fantasy XIV is made up of goblins who want to control all of the world's technology and knowledge, and they have no problem killing people to get what they want. And since it seems like they're actually inside of the Primal, the odds of them killing a lot of people are pretty high. Destroying the thing won't be all that easy since you have to find a way inside, deal with the Illuminati, then destroy the Primal's engine, which will only work if it's actually a machine. And there's the problem of the barrier that's around the thing that has to be dealt with too. From what Backrix says, the barrier was there long before the Primal. It popped up 3 years ago after a big earthquake. Roundrocks, another goblin, was there and she saw the whole thing. She's Slowfix's daughter and spends way more time collecting junk than the other goblins. In short, she's a hoarder. Young she may be, but she remembers exactly what she saw. The mechanical Primal had rose up out of the water, which caused the earthquakes, which means this isn't the first time someone summoned that particular Primal, but they failed the last time. So Cid's question is, was it the Illuminati who had summoned it before, or was it someone else entirely? A goblin that you all know well, who is apparently an expert on the Illuminati, Brayflox Alltalks, shows up, and Cid decides to talk to her to get some information on your enemies, while the Warrior of Light goes to help Biggs and Wedge find a way into the giant Primal. While you're all making your plans, an Al Ra with a scar on her face watches you from a distance. The barrier is posing a problem for Biggs and Wedge, but when the Primal came out of the water, it put one of its hands on shore through the barrier, giving the two of them an entry point into the big machine. Of course it's locked, and there doesn't seem to be a keyhole or anything, so Wedge tapped into the Illuminati's communications and is trying to see if they'll mention a way to get into the thing. He's getting a signal, but it's just repeating a weird pattern over and over. Wedge is positive that it's a code, and the Illuminati came up with a crystal that they use to decrypt their messages. All Wedge needs is one of those, and he's positive that he can figure out the message. Unfortunately, he doesn't know where to find one, but Redbricks thinks that Roundrocks might have one in her pile of stuff. Wedge has built a device that will detect the crystal if it's nearby, so it gives it to you and sends you to go sift through Round Rock's stash. The goblin does have one of the crystals, but it's her favorite treasure, so she doesn't really want to give it to you. But since you're doing something important, you can have it as long as you bring it back. So the Warrior of Light brings it to Wedge, and the message is immediately decoded. They're talking about some nonsense, but that's clearly another code. Apparently they made a failsafe just in case someone got their hands on one of their crystals. The scar-faced Owl Ra shows up, and she says that she can crack the code if you're willing to make a deal with her. Her name is Mide and she's a treasure hunter. She wants something that's inside of the giant, and she'll help you get inside if you help her make it out with the item. She's well aware of the fact that the Illuminati are inside of the Primal, which is why she came to you. Strength in numbers and all that. None of you have any reason to object, so she tells Biggs how to open the hatch into the machine, and it actually works. The fact that the Illuminati were announcing the code to enter the place seems a bit weird to Sid, but it opened the door so he'll go with it. Unfortunately, Brayflox didn't know all that much about the Illuminati's plan or the Primal, which means you'll just have to learn about it while you explore. Since the thing is technically a giant machine, if the Warrior of Light and his team follows the pipes and wires, they should be able to reach the core. Mide doesn't care as long as she gets to come with you. Sid would join you, but he has one thing to do first, so the Warrior of Light heads into the giant Primal to deal with the Illuminati. The path into the Primal is guarded by some very large and heavily armed machines that the Warrior of Light makes short work of, which opens the way forward for Mide and an unexpected Round Rocks who couldn't help but to sneak in after you in hopes of finding new treasures. The machine bits aren't what Mide is looking for, so she doesn't care if the goblin takes them. Apparently what she's after wasn't in the area at all, something that's pointed out by a group of newcomers who show up. It's the Illuminati, and their leader, Quick Thinks All Thoughts. That has to be the best goblin name ever. Mide pulls a gun on them, but one of the goblins says that they all have explosives on their backs, so shooting them isn't a good idea. Another of the goblins taunts you all, saying that the Enigma codex is gone, and they've already started the Alexander initiative, which is way more than he was supposed to say, since none of you had a clue what they were planning at all. It's very likely that Quick Thinks was going to kill the blabbermouth goblin, but Mide takes the opportunity to shoot at them, causing their packs to explode. And since they're so far away from you, the explosions only hurt the goblins, which gives you all time to run, but not before Round Rocks asks what is the Enigma Codex. It turns out that's the treasure that Mide is after, but she'll have to try for it at a safer time. Back safe and sound at your camp, you let Biggs know what happened. After you tell him about your run-in with the Illuminati, he figures that Alexander might actually be the Primal's name, and since you didn't find its core, that means you have to do more searching. But at least you all managed to make it out of there alive. Biggs is ready to take another crack at finding the core whenever you are, and you should probably get started soon, since Wedge is hearing chants about death to the Uplanders coming through the Link Pearl. Seems like you may have started a war with the Illuminati after your last encounter, so it'll probably be more guards blocking your way the next time. As expected, when the Warrior of Light continues his trip into the core, the path is blocked by an army of goblins and their deadly tech that takes a lot of sword swipes to bring down. A lot of explosions later, the battle is done, and Sid, Mide, and Round Rock show up to admire your handiwork. We all knew that Sid couldn't avoid seeing the place for himself, so it was only a matter of time before he showed up in person. Sid's curious about what Mide is searching for, and she doesn't even try to hide it. She wants the Enigma Codex, which is a book that holds the work of one of the greatest masters of technology from a little over 100 years ago. It has plans inside for everything from machines that can run for a century to things that can make better cheese. Even selling a single page from the book would be worth millions. The most important bit of info in the book, however, is a plan for a walking citadel. That's the form that the Illuminati's Primal took, since they used the book's knowledge to summon it, a fact that Mide already knew since she'd both seen and read from the Enigma Codex. The Citadel was meant to be a fully self-contained city with places to live and grow crops, so the people who lived there would never have to leave. Add to that the fact that the place was nearly impregnable and able to move back and forth, it became the perfect fortress, one that was meant to take the world's best and brightest to all the corners of the world so they could learn the mysteries of creation, all from inside of the fortress named Alexander. The Illuminati are hoping to use the fortress to gather knowledge in the same way, but this version of Alexander is actually a primal, which means walking it around the world would leave a trail of etherless wastelands in its wake, which adds to the extreme need to stop the Illuminati as soon as possible. There seems to be a problem on the Alexander front, but Sid's already working on fixing it. The communications that Wedge has been picking up have been bugging him for a while, because something about them just don't make sense. The Illuminati have already made a base inside of Alexander, which means they had to have found a way through the barrier. So why did they need to use the hatch that's sticking outside of the barrier at all? And why are they sending out coded messages on how to unlock a door that they both don't need and should have already unlocked? The answer is simple. The Illuminati must have a spy in Idleshire that was using the hatch to go back and forth. The spy probably knows that you've all broken the code, which means he or she won't be able to use the hatch for a while. That means the spy will need to make contact with the Illuminati soon, so Sid had everyone clear the area around the entrance so you all could watch for the spy, then follow him. Before the words are fully out of his mouth, Wedge gets a call from Redbrick saying that Brayflox went inside of Alexander, but there's no way that she's a spy for the Illuminati, so someone had to be pretending to be her. Whatever the case, you all race off to find out what exactly is going on. You all chase the goblin through more of the giant Primal fortress, fighting your way past monsters and what looks like a human-shaped Capri Sun, which has to be the strangest security guard ever, before the Warrior of Light, Sid, Mide, and Round Rocks catch up to the spy. Quick Thinks All Thoughts and a few of the Illuminati members arrive to give the spy a chance to report that whatever the Illuminati was searching for has been found. Then they shoot him. That's not really the best way to inspire loyalty in your subordinates, but Quick Thinks isn't really worried about anything other than completing his mission of bringing the world into harmony by weeding out the useless parts. He knows that Alexander will suck the life out of everyone outside of it, but those the Illuminati choose will be safe inside its walls. They will get to live on as masters of knowledge who will rebuild the world better than it was before. He figures that the smartest uplanders will join him, and the stupid ones don't deserve to see his perfect world anyway. Instead of killing the goblin like he should have, the Warrior of Light just watches Quick Thinks leave. Sid is convinced that the goblins are insane, but Mide doesn't see it all so black and white as that. They are following the plans laid out in the Enigma codex, but they are rushing the process, which is why it seems so bad. That part doesn't make the Illuminati crazy. The fact that they're crazy makes them crazy, but anyone can do a lot of harm in an attempt to do good if they aren't careful, and that doesn't necessarily make them crazy. She's clearly not talking about the goblins, but whatever or whoever she's thinking about, she's not interested in saying more at the moment. But she does think that she can stop Alexander if you can get her to the core. From what she read in the Enigma Codex, she knows that the core is nearby, but she's not sure how close you are to it. Round Rocks has been paying more attention to the path that you traveled, and since the core is in the chest, she's able to point you all in the right direction, but it definitely won't be unguarded, so you all head out to get prepared to charge into the core. You don't have long, because if the Illuminati fully wake Alexander, they will be all but unstoppable, so the Warrior of Light repairs his gear and heads into the core with Mide. It's guarded by yet another very sturdy machine, one that takes a lot more punishment before it's taken down, but after hitting it enough, it explodes just like everything else. With the way clear, Biggs and Wedge join the Warrior of Light and Mide at the very large heart of Alexander. True to her word, Mide climbs on top of the core and opens it with a few button presses, but Quick Thinks All Thoughts shows up, admitting that maybe you're all smarter than he gave you credit for, but he doesn't seem all that upset about what you've done. From what Wedge sees, the goblin rides deeper into Alexander, talking like he actually won, almost like he wanted you all to deactivate the core. What's even more odd is Quick Thinks shows up alone, like he'd sent his honor guard off to do something more important even than watching his back. The thought hits Wedge that the goblin might have sent his minions off to Idleshire while you were all away, so you all race out of the Primal only to find that the Illuminati did attack the place. It was a strange attack according to Redbricks, because they only took useless junk that they stole from Round Rocks, which means what they took probably was anything but useless, and they made it a point to take everything that she'd gathered. They may have even taken her if she hadn't been out looking for more stuff during the attack. It's Sid and Biggs to the rescue. They show up with one very unconscious goblin thief as well as Round Rocks' possessions. Biggs had figured that the thief might be in the area, and with a little searching they found him. But the question is, what exactly were the Illuminati looking for in Round Rocks' stash? They clearly hadn't found it, otherwise they wouldn't have still been hanging around, which makes the little goblin wonder if what they were after was the stone that she loaned to you. She'd never taken it out of Wedge's machine, so it wasn't in her stash. She'd found it by the Charlian ruins when Alexander first appeared, something that Mide was completely unaware of. When she takes out the stone and it glows, Mide recognizes it as a piece of the Enigma Codex, which means the only reason the Illuminati hasn't proceeded with their plan is because they don't have the completed codex, meaning they will definitely be back, and you and the mysterious Mide will have to deal with them. After doing a bit of thinking, Round Rocks, after realizing that the glowstone is the thing that Mide has been searching for this entire time, decides to give it to the Al Ra, and since there aren't many people who could take it from the Warrior of Light, the goblin gives it to him so he can give it to Mide. The treasure hunter is usually staring at Alexander from nearby, so it isn't hard to track her down. Mide is flattered that the goblin is willing to give away her most precious possession, and at first she wasn't gonna accept it, but she decides that it would be better in the hands of someone who could actually keep it safe. Round Rocks isn't exactly what you'd call a fighter, so Mide decides to hold on to it, even though to her, the piece of the Enigma Codex is nothing more than any other rock. When Round Rocks held it, the stone had let out a flash of light, but that hadn't happened when anyone else touched it, not even the Warrior of Light. The Codex is protected by magic that keeps it from being read by anyone who doesn't believe in what it says down to their very core. It's very rare to find a person that can actually read it, which means if the Illuminati find out that Round Rocks can, they'll take her. Mide figures that the best way to keep Round Rocks safe would be for her to lure the Illuminati away with the piece of the Codex that they want so much. They'll be hunting for her, and won't be thinking about Round Rocks, but Mide still wants you to watch out for the little goblin just in case while she's away. Backrix comes to get you because apparently something's been bothering Wedge, so you head back to camp to see what's bothering the Lalafell. Apparently the Illuminati are getting ready to do something big because Y'shtola sent a message saying that Alexander's starting to draw a lot more ether from the area. Not to mention the fact that the goblins are gathering a lot of explosives and other stuff likely to build another big weapon. In short, things are pretty bad, so you all need to attack them before they can finish, and Wedge already has a plan. One that, of course, has the Warrior of Light leading the assault. Biggs has already scouted out the area that he wants to attack from, so you and Wedge head there to get things started. Biggs was expecting Sid to show up, but he hadn't thought that Y'shtola would come too. Since the ether is being drained at a super high rate, she obviously needed to be there to help. From what she can see, Alexander has absorbed a whole lot of ether already, but there's a different kind of energy coming from inside of the barrier. Figuring out what this new energy is will have to wait. For now, whatever the Illuminati are doing needs to be stopped before they can get it fully started, and Wedge has built a device that should help with that. He calls it the Electro Jammer number 3, which is weird since it's apparently the first of its kind. If it works the way that he says it will, it should disrupt all of the Illuminati's communication devices, making it a lot harder for them to organize a defense when you all attack. The device has a little more kick to it than everyone expected, and the explosion that it makes either causes Alexander to lift its other hand, or it was about to do that anyway, and Wedge's timing was just a coincidence. Either way, Wedge refuses to take the blame for the Primal moving. The good news, according to Y'shtola, the Primal is still asleep. Even better, it moving created a new way for you all to head inside, which means it's time for the Warrior of Light to do his thing. While he does that, Sid and Y'shtola are going to go and tell Matoya what just happened. While you all get ready to make your move, Quick Thinks All Thoughts watches from above saying that everything is playing out exactly how it was written. The Illuminati weren't all that unprepared for your attack, and apparently their experiments don't stop at modifying just machines. One of the goblins who manages to take the title of best named goblin in the game, Ratfinks Twinkledinks, has done quite a few modifications to himself that makes him very not fun to fight. But the Warrior of Light and his crew of adventurers bring down the goblin and his minions. With the attack being a success, the Warrior of Light meets back up with Biggs and Wedge at the base camp, only for them to let him know that there's another problem. While they were patrolling the area, they saw Mide talking to the Illuminati. Not only that, she gave them the piece of the Enigma Codex before going into Alexander with them. It all looks really bad, but it starts to look a lot less like Mide's actually a traitor when QuickThink shows up to the camp talking about how your new friend had been working with them from the very beginning. Him trying so hard to convince you that Mide's a traitor does the exact opposite, but after the Illuminati leave, Backrix says that there is some truth to what the goblin said. Backrix had looked into what had happened 3 years ago and found out that a group of Al Ra treasure hunters had gone to explore the ruins near the Thaliac River only to die during the earthquakes that had come as a part of Alexander's first summoning. It's likely that Mide was one of those treasure hunters, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she had something to do with the summoning, except for the fact that Backrix did some reading from a book that he got from a Charlian, and it said that the person who had written the Enigma Codex 100 years ago was a blue-haired Zayla just like Mide. She can't be the only blue-haired Zayla out there, and instead of speculating, Round Rocks runs off to find the woman to get answers straight from her. Wedge chases after the goblin to keep her safe, while the Warrior of Light continues his attack on the Illuminati, so it's back into Alexander we go. The goblins are definitely ready for your next attack, and they've put together a much more deadly defense, but that doesn't stop the Warrior of Light and his crew. When he makes it back to the camp after the battle, Mide is there, and she admits that she did meet up with the Illuminati, but what she gave them was just a rock that she found, not the codex. But Quick Thinks hadn't been lying about what he said. Mide had not only been working with the Illuminati, she had taught them how to summon the Primal in the first place. She had planned on using them to complete her own goal, the same way she was planning on using all of you. The author of the Enigma Codex had been an ancestor of hers, and the goal of creating a perfect world had been a mission for some of her tribe for years. They had worked in secret to bring it about, and those ideals in some corrupted fashion have taken over the Illuminati. The leader of Mide's group had been very charismatic, and Mide had fallen in love with him, which made her even more eager to make his dream come true. That's why she didn't hesitate when he wanted to summon a Primal, and 3 years ago they had tried to do it. The summoning went horribly wrong. Alexander killed most of Mide's friends and dragged the man she loved into the core of the machine. Not knowing what else to do, Mide made the barrier to seal Alexander away, but while she was doing that, the codex exploded and the Primal disappeared. One of the pieces cut her across the face, which is how she got that scar, and that moment showed her just how stupid their plan had been. It only took the loss of all of her friends for her to learn that lesson, but it still doesn't explain why she decided to help the Illuminati summon the thing again, or help you all get inside of it for that matter. Her reasons are simple and kind of insane. She did it all because she hopes it will let her see the man she loves again. She thinks his soul is still inside of the Primal. Telling her how dumb her plan was is not the best idea, so Biggs decides to find out just how bad things would get if the codex was made whole. If the codex is repaired, it would in fact be able to completely control the Primal, but you need the complete codex and someone who can read it. With both of those, Alexander could instantly take anyone to wherever they wanted to go, likely draining the life out of the place in the process. Mide used to be able to read the codex, but since that day 3 years ago, she's lost the ability. Only Round Rocks has the gift as far as she knows, meaning that the child is the key to controlling the Primal. And right on cue, Wedge runs up to say that the little goblin's been taken by the Illuminati. With Round Rocks being captured, the Warrior of Light and his allies race back into Alexander to find her. Quick Thinks decides to deal with you himself, and he uses a lot of tech to do it, but he's still no match for you. So he tries to fly away, but his damaged machine explodes. It's highly unlikely that he didn't survive, and there's still a lot more stuff you have to fight your way through to free the goblin, so you all head back to camp to get more supplies for the next fight. While you fought Quick Thinks, Mide mapped out the rest of Alexander's interior, so she knows where you need to go, but Backrix doesn't trust the woman. Since she was involved with the original summoning of Alexander, Backrix doesn't know if she's trying to help you all or simply finish her own mission. The goblin has a point, and Mide understands why some of you might not fully trust her, but even though she's the last of her group, the whole Build a Perfect World mission was never really her dream. She was willing to put that same amount of effort into any cause, as long as she was able to do it with the people she cared about. She honestly can't understand why she had ever been able to read the Enigma Codex in the first place, since she wasn't all that dedicated to its teachings. In short, the dream of a perfect world died with her leader. As for Alexander, the part you've been exploring is called Mide, named after an ancient king who had asked the gods for the power to turn whatever he touched into gold. They gave him what he asked for, and he liked it until he accidentally turned the woman he loved into a statue. What he wanted the most ended up costing him everything. That same story can be applied to Mide and her people. The hunt for what they wanted most ended up costing them everything. Now all she wants is to talk to the man she loved just one more time, nothing else. Now that she's told you all her goal, she wants to get back to the important mission of saving Round Rocks, and she has a plan. Alexander has 3 main sections, each with their own core. The Warrior of Light has cleared a path to the core of Mide, but the Illuminati definitely have set up a strong defense to keep you from destroying it. Round Rocks is most likely being kept in Alexander's upper body, but the Illuminati have the path there locked, so you have to destroy the core to shut down the Primal. If you break the Primal, the Illuminati will have to fix it before they can use Round Rocks, which will give you all more time to save her, especially since they'll probably have to gather more crystals to get the Primal back up and running. With the plan made, it's time to get back into the Primal and fight the Illuminati. They have indeed put together a powerful set of machines to bar your path, but the Warrior of Light and his adventurer allies take them down, clearing a path to the core. Like before, Mide shuts it down, only for Quickthinks and a lot of goblins to show up. Wedge taunts him for not fighting you alone again since he lost the last time, but Quickthinks claims that he lost on purpose, just like he let you shut down the core on purpose. Because according to him, he knows the future, and he knows that one of you have the piece of the Enigma codex that he wants. Biggs and Wedge both pretend to have it, while the Warrior of Light and Mide hop on the elevator to escape with the codex. But proving that he might actually know a bit about the future, Quickthinks parks his hover platform in the perfect spot for it to fall into his lap when your platform lurches and makes the Enigma codex fall right out of Mide's pocket. With what he wanted in hand, the Illuminati leave you all to ponder just how Quickthinks got the better of you all, and now you have to figure out how to get the codex and Round Rocks back. Back at the camp, things get even more strange. Backrix is confused about why you're all back so soon. He just saw you all leave a few moments ago, and you shouldn't have had time to even reach Alexander, let alone do all of the stuff you claimed. And he's not the only one that's confused. Everyone outside of Alexander says that you all just left a moment ago. It's almost like time stopped when you stepped through the barrier around the Primal. And if that's the case, Quickthinks seeing into the future might not be all that crazy. Mide thinks that there may be a simpler explanation, at least when it comes to how Quickthinks predicted your moves. There's a machine inside of Alexander that's made to do very complicated math problems, and using it to determine the probability of something happening isn't that far-fetched. But that only worked for simple events. It actually makes a lot more sense that there are some time shenanigans going on. For now, it's all only a theory, but Wedge thinks that it's possible that Alexander has distorted time inside of the barrier, and it's possible that the Illuminati know that and they're using it to their advantage. They may even be using the Primal to somehow bend time to their will. If they're doing that, then your mission was destined to fail from the very beginning. The doom and gloom speculation starts to bother Biggs, and he decides that it might be a good idea to call Sid and see what he thinks might be going on. It's hard to explain over a link pearl, so Sid and Ishtola head back to the camp to chat. Before anyone can fill them in, Alexander causes the land to shake, so you all race off to see what the Primal's doing. From what Ishtola can see, without its core, the Primal is starting to break down, but it's doing it very slowly. Using her goggles, Sid sees something even stranger. The ether that was leaking out of the damaged Primal started flowing in reverse, like time started passing backwards, something that should be impossible, but since none of you know much about the Primal, there's no telling what it can actually do. And to make matters worse, it could be undoing everything you did to shut down the cores. If the Illuminati can simply reset your progress on a whim, beating them will be all but impossible. And to make matters even worse, with Round Rocks in hand and the final piece of the codex, Quickthinks and the Illuminati gain full control of Alexander. All that's left is for them to wait for the final core to power up, then they'll be able to unleash Alexander's full potential. That won't just give them the power to remake the world as it currently is, they'll have control over time, and that'll give them the ability to rewrite history itself. Mide's been extremely worried about Round Rocks, which has her pacing back and forth a lot. During one of her random walks, she saw something out of the corner of her eye that looks a lot like the cat Shanoa that's always been hanging around Quickthinks. If the cat's there, then it's likely that the Illuminati aren't too far behind, so naturally the two of you go to track it down. The two of you find the cat, and sure enough, an Illuminati spy isn't far off. Sid and Ishtola take him out, but not before he starts bragging about how once they activate the final core of Alexander, they'll be able to travel through time and be unstoppable. The whole thing sounds crazy to Sid, but the goblins seem positive that Quickthinks was a prophet from the future sent to fix history. What makes this situation even worse is he claims that the battle for the future's already been won, at least according to the Enigma Codex. It's depressing to think about it, but it would explain why Quickthinks seems to already know what you were going to do. And if it is true, it will make your entire fight with the Illuminati pointless. Backrix thinks all of this talk is nonsense, and he's more interested in hearing your plans on dealing with the current situation. Ishtola and Sid had been getting things set up for their final assault, with the help of Matoya of course, when the cat Mide had been following had came into the cave and acted like it wanted them to follow it. They had, and it had led them right to the Illuminati spy. It was a happy coincidence, but since the tiny cat's been with Quickthinks constantly, Sid refuses to believe that it turned on its master at random. Either it switched sides, or Quickthinks is setting you all up. If the thing could talk, Sid would want to question it, and since it can't really hurt to try, he tells the cat to meow twice for yes and once for no. Then he asks if it's Quickthinks' cat. It actually answers yes. So Mide asks if it wants to go back home, and it answers no. That makes Sid start to think that it really can understand them. However, that doesn't mean that she's not still working for Quick Things. While that may be true, Backwards remembers Round Rock saying that she had saw a black cat watching her 3 years ago when she had first found the piece of the Enigma codex. That had seemed like useless information back then, but now Backwards is starting to wonder if Shanoa is the exact same cat. But if it had been, then it would be full grown by now, unless it somehow jumped through time. It all sounds ridiculous, even to Y'shtola who suggested it, but it can't be ruled out. And if that's the case, it could mean that Quick Things has been manipulating things as far back as Mide's first summoning of Alexander, which means you're all likely screwed. Talking about the problem's not really doing anything to fix it, so Sid thinks that your best option is to just head back into Alexander and see what you can find. And Wedge being Wedge, he's made something that should help you get through the barrier and back into the Primal. He's running the last tests on the device now, so the Warrior of Light and the others head off to meet him. Wedge knows that he went a little overboard with the last invention, but he's positive that his next one will work exactly how it's supposed to. The plan is simple. You'll be attacking the Primal from 2 angles again. Y'shtola's working on cutting off Alexander's ether supply, while the Warrior of Light's going to go and rescue Round Rocks. Without her, the Illuminati won't be able to control time, so that'll even the playing field, hopefully. You'll be heading in through Alexander's head with the help of Wedge's new device, something that he's named Barrier Be Gone, which is supposed to, you guessed it, remove Mide's barrier. The problem is, once the barrier's gone, Alexander will be free to move, so you'll need to do what you're doing fast, or things are going to go wrong very, very quickly. Sid's gonna fly you as close as he can to the top of the Primal, then you're gonna go in and clear the way for the rest of them. Once you've done that, you need to get back to the ship so Wedge can turn the barrier back on. All of that needs to be done before Alexander can move, so no pressure. This is hardly the most dangerous thing that the Warrior of Light's done, so he and his adventurer buddies head in. Once the barrier drops, they all rush in, fighting against swarms of goblins as they make their way to the top of the Primal and inside, where even more of the Illuminati's toys try to bar their way. Toys that the Warrior of Light takes great pride in destroying. With the path into the top of the Primal clear, Sid and the others reactivate the barrier, leaving the top of Alexander's head outside, which gives you a way back in to make your next attack once you're ready. Y'shtola's glad to see that at least one of your missions was accomplished. Cutting off Alexander's ether supply didn't work at all, and she thinks Mide might be able to help her understand why since she summoned the thing. All Primals constantly draw ether from the surrounding land, both to make themselves stronger and to keep their physical forms. She and Matoya had figured that they could create a barrier between the land's ether and Alexander using some device called Arcanima that she had Sid put around the area. The devices are working fine, but for some reason Alexander isn't being hindered by them at all. Mide may know why, but she can't fully see how it'll matter all that much. When she was younger, a man that she didn't know came up to her and told her that anything she wanted could be hers if she listened to him. A grown person telling a random kid that should be a big old red flag, but not all kids are given the stranger danger talk. They definitely should be, especially with all the crazies running around now. If Mide's parents had told her not to talk to strangers, we probably could have avoided dealing with the cult and their time-traveling Primal, but they didn't, so here we are. She didn't understand what the man was talking about, but he had told her to reunite the shards of the Enigma Codex and perform the sacred rite before the ruins that stand against the river's flow. Then her hopes and dreams would all become a reality. After that, he gave her a horn to use as a catalyst for the summoning and told her that it was a gift from Travanchet. Then he left. Y'shtola's had some run-ins with the man before, and as you may have guessed, he's an ascian. The horn was supposedly a relic with the power to manipulate ether in the air. The Scions had hunted it for a while since it could be deadly in the wrong hands, and if it's being used by Alexander's third core to draw ether, then there's no way to stop it from drawing ether from anywhere on the star. That means you'll just have to break the core the old-fashioned way, but that won't stop the Illuminati from simply rewinding time to undo everything you've done. All in all, nothing's changed. Your only course of action is to save Round Rocks. The Circle of Knowing had given Y'shtola the mission of recovering the horn, and not only did she fail, it was her failure that caused it to fall into Travanchet's hands. She feels that this incident is as much her fault as anyone else's, so she's more than willing to help in any way that she can. Which means it's time to rescue Round Rocks, or at least to try. From above, Quickthinks is watching you all like he still knows what you're planning, and oddly enough, Backrix notices that his tiny black cat is still with him, which means that the one that's standing next to you all couldn't be his. So he decides to rename it Schrodinger. That's a very on-the-nose thing to name the cat, and if you don't know why, it's a little bit of real-world lore that I guess I will go into. Schrodinger's cat in simple terms is a thought experiment done by Erwin Schrodinger, where you hypothetically put a cat in a box with radioactive material that may or may not be released after a certain amount of time. After a while, as long as the box isn't open, the cat exists in two states at the same time. It's both alive and dead. It'll stay like that until someone opens the box to definitively prove that the cat is in one state or the other. Now you can figure out on your own what that means in regards to this story. Regardless of how weird the cat situation is, Biggs and the others did get a good look around the inside of Alexander, which let them figure out where Round Rocks is being kept. She's in the central core, and from what Biggs could see, all you'll need to do is ride one of those floating platforms there. Of course they'll be guarded, so the Warrior of Light will head back in through Alexander's head, while the others travel through Mide to make sure the Illuminati don't have any traps waiting to ambush you. Once you've gotten your hands on one of the platforms, Biggs and Wedge will do what they do best and cause a distraction. With all the talking done, you all get to work. As expected, there's no small amount of goblins working hard to stop you from interfering with their plans, and their tech and fighting skill makes things a little bit difficult. But after taking down the mercenary named Lame Brick Strikebox, the Warrior of Light has a clear path to Round Rocks. Ishtola, Sid, and Mide had to deal with a few goblins of their own, but it wasn't too much trouble, and you all find Round Rocks safe and sound sitting in a chair right next to the Enigma codex, directly above the third core of Alexander. The amount of ether Ishtola can see pumping through the core is outright terrifying, and all that power has been being used by Round Rocks, which has made the little goblin a little unstable, but it has given her the ability to alter time. Hearing that it really is true, Mide wonders out loud if she genuinely could fix her mistakes from 3 years ago. So Round Rocks, trying to be a good friend, decides to help and activates Alexander, spinning time backwards despite everyone telling her not to. Biggs, Wedge, and Backrix get a front row seat for the trip since they're on top of the Primal, and they're pretty shocked when Sid tells them that they're being sent back in time. They appear along with Alexander right at the moment when Mide and her friends were summoning the Primal. They're excited because they think that what they're doing worked, but it's short-lived because Alexander activates and the Illuminati shoots Mide's friends. Alexander starts trying to suck Mide inside, but Dayan pushes her out of the way, getting sucked into the Primal in her place. Backrix finds the whole thing fascinating, and he's writing it all in his book until Schrodinger knocks it out of his hands, and both the cat and the book fall off of the Primal right as Mide of the past activated her barrier. Whatever Round Rocks did ends, and you're all snapped back to your own time, and Quickthinks shows up to brag about how once again you've done exactly what was written. Ironically enough, it seems like Sid and the others still haven't figured things out, so Quickthinks decides to break it down for them. Time is a circle, or a wheel, and everything you've done or will do has already happened, and you're just completing the loop. In other words, when Mide and her friends summoned Alexander 3 years ago, what they had actually seen were you all traveling back through time. Hearing that makes Mide realize that what had happened to her and her friends was destined to happen, and there was never anything she could have done to fix it. More goblins show up, so Ishtola decides that it's time to retreat since you do have Round Rocks, but knowing that everything she's done is pointless, Mide decides to stay behind. There's nothing you can do about it right now, so you all head out before you get captured, or killed. Biggs and the others are happy to see Round Rocks, but now that Mide's with the Illuminati, Round Rocks wants to go back for her. Sid had never planned on leaving the woman there, but first you all need to make a plan, so they call Jesse to pick them up. The day brought a lot of painful revelations, especially since the Illuminati had planned out everything from the incident 3 years ago to now, and they had used all of you to do it. But worst of all, the one thing that had kept Mide going was a hope of seeing Dayan again, and now she knows that'll never happen because there's definitely nothing left of the man. This whole mission has been going poorly, but it's not a complete loss. You saved Round Rocks, and without her the Illuminati can't turn time backwards, which means it's time to destroy Alexander's final core, and this time it should be permanent. With the risk of everything you do being undone dealt with, the Warrior of Light and his allies head to Alexander's final core. The defenses that the Illuminati have put in place are top-notch, complete with the Cruise Chaser, which is the Illuminati version of the Transformer Starscream, an amount that really should have been a reward for this fight instead of something that's put on the Mog Station. After destroying the Illuminati's very expensive machine in a fight that Sid and the others watch from a safe distance away, you all get an up-close look at Alexander's third core, and Sid sees just how massive it is. For it to get that big, it must have been drawing in ether at a super fast rate, and with the power that it's stored up, it'll probably be able to regenerate itself even faster than you can break it. Instead of wasting time trying, Sid figures that since the control room has a way to control the Primal, it should have a way to turn it off too. Of course, that'll mean bringing Round Rock's back since she's the only one who can use the Enigma codex. It's not something that any of you really want to put her through again, but Quick Things needs to be stopped, and you can't really think of another way. Speak of the devil and he will appear, and sure enough, Quick Things shows up with his book and cat in tow, claiming that the future shows that things are going to end very badly for you all regardless of your plans. All other passages to the control room are blocked, so to get there you'll have to go right where Quick Things wants you to, and his predictions say that you all die on your attempt. He goes to float away, but as he does, his cat knocks the book out of his hand and falls down in front of you all, similar to what happened with Backrix. Backrix picks up the book that Quick Things has been carrying around, and he realizes that it's actually his journal, the one that had been knocked out of his hand when you all took a trip to the past. So the entire time, the only reason Quick Things has known what was going to happen was because he had the book that Backrix had written about your whole mission. In other words, he's not a prophet at all. All of his predictions came from the book. Granted, this book thing is a big time paradox in itself since Quick Things couldn't have gotten the book until after Backrix wrote the book, but the things that Backrix wrote in the book were a direct result of what Quick Things did after having the book. But since thinking like that would give all of us a headache, we're just gonna let this little time snafu slide. What's even more confusing than the book is why Shanoa, who is also Schrodinger, set all of this nonsense into motion. For starters, the cat should have died from falling off of the Primal, but fall damage has only killed like 3 people in the game so far, so I can let that part slide too. Quick Things must have found the cat when he found the book, and he decided to take her in, but that still doesn't explain why the cat is causing all of these time shenanigans by knocking the book around so much. Figuring that out won't help with dealing with Alexander's core, and that's the only thing that Sid is concerned about at the moment. And since the pages in the journal don't say anything about you all dying on your trip to the control room, Sid is ready to get things set up to destroy Alexander for good, so you all head out to get prepared. Things are not as good as you may think, however. Even though Quick Things lost the book and Round Rocks, he's apparently had the power to use the Enigma Codex all along, and he activates it so he'll be ready for when you come back. Once you're all as prepared as you can be, the Warrior of Light, Sid, Biggs, and Wedge head back into the Primal to attack the core. Quick Things is ready for you all, and he stops time, summons a smaller version of Alexander, and sets it to fire on you all while you can't move. Time restarts, giving you all just enough time to avoid taking a point-blank Kamehameha to the face, which would have definitely murdered you all. Since the sneak attack failed, the mini Alexander vanishes into a rift in time, one that stays open. Instead of waiting around for it to reappear and hit you all with another sneak attack, one that you might not be able to dodge, the Warrior of Light heads into the rift to fight it, while Sid and the others clear a path to the control room. Fighting this thing that's the embodiment of Alexander's power is not something easily overcome. The Primal takes this fight as a test to determine whether or not you deserve to have a future, which if you fail, I'm pretty sure that you'd be dead, so you don't really have a choice but to win. Which of course you do. When the Warrior of Light pops back out of the rift, Istola and Round Rocks both have joined Sid and the others. So with the way clear, you all head into the control room, where Quick Things is more than happy to reveal that he has always been able to control the Primal, so nothing can stop him from rewinding time. A surprisingly still alive Mide makes her entrance by shooting Quick Things' guards, and since he revealed that he can control the codex without Round Rocks, she understands why he had used the girl instead of doing it himself from the start. Controlling the Primal at full power could very likely destroy the person who tried, so he hadn't wanted to risk his own life until he didn't have a choice. But he is controlling it now, and he thinks that nothing can stop him, so Mide proves him wrong by shooting him in the head. With him down, that gives Round Rocks the chance to undo what Quick Things has started and shut down the Primal's final core. Without it constantly drawing in ether, Alexander has started burning through what it had stored pretty fast, and it won't be long before it shuts down and fades away entirely. Something none of you want to be around for, but before you head out, Round Rocks wants to know, how did Mide survive after you all left? She's not all that sure herself. The place had started shaking and she'd gotten thrown somewhere dark. She had been unconscious there until a few minutes ago. She had probably gotten knocked down a garbage chute or something, but all that really matters is that she's okay. With the mission a success, it's past time for you all to head home. But of course, things can't possibly be that simple, and what should have been a very dead QuickThinks reaches out and activates the Enigma codex again. Apparently he had done a lot of tinkering on his own body, and what you had thought was a weird looking mask turns out to actually be his head. A head that can survive a point-blank gunshot. The goblin reactivates the core and attempts to use Alexander's power to go back to the past, but the Primal decides not to obey him, something that it's apparently been able to do all along. It also does something that you failed to do, and finishes off QuickThinks. It makes Sid think that the Primal has a mind of its own, which it does, and just like Mide had thought, that mind belongs to Dan. He's really been in there the whole time watching over her, but the two of them only get to talk for a moment before the core overloads and starts to draw in ether so fast that Ishtola's afraid that it'll drain Eorzea dry in a few minutes if it's not stopped. With it being in the state that it's in, she doesn't think that any of you can stop it now. But Mide thinks that this was all part of Dayan's plan, and she realizes what he wanted her to do, and that is throw herself into the core. She merges with it, and she tells you all to leave as she's drawn into what Dayan calls Alexander's dream. It's a place outside of time where Alexander watches the past, present, and future, seeing each and every possible outcome for every situation. And since he's a part of the Primal, Dayan sees it all too. Since Alexander was born from the desire to create a perfect world, it's watched everything unfold to see what path would give the result that it wanted. It saw everything from the Illuminati ruling things to what would have happened if he had stepped in and stopped Bahamut. And after studying every possible outcome, it realized that the only chance there was for a perfect world to be born was if Alexander himself ceased to exist. So it decided to erase itself, since the amount of ether that it consumes by just existing would eventually destroy everything. So instead of taking that risk, it decided to leave the fate of the world in the hands of the Warrior of Light. Having seen him in action, Mide can understand why. Knowing that he would eventually be the source of a major calamity, Alexander sent the cat Shanoa out to put time back on the right path. With that done, there's only one task left. Since the horn was a part of the third core of Alexander, it will be able to regrow itself instantly by drawing in ether from all around the world. The only way to stop it is to seal it away in a moment in time that would loop forever and ever. And that will trap Mide and Dayan as well. Something she's perfectly fine with. Outside, Biggs and Wedge notice that everything inside of Alexander's barrier has stopped moving, like time's frozen in place. Round Rocks and the others have made their way back to Idleshire, and while none of them are happy about Mide's fate, she did stop Alexander, so that's a good thing at least. Round Rocks is of course taking this hard, and she runs off somewhere, so you all go to track her down. It's not hard to find her since she isn't exactly hiding, she just wanted to be alone to think. When you all were running out of Alexander, she had found the glowstone in her pocket, but it won't glow for her anymore. Sid thinks it's because the experience that she had with the Illuminati changed her view of the world. The Enigma Codex was made from one man's desire to build a perfect world, and its knowledge is sealed off from anyone who doesn't fully believe in what it promotes. Both QuickThinks and Mide, when she was younger, never questioned the teachings of the Codex, but after what happened, Round Rocks can't really blindly follow anything anymore. The glowstone staying dark in her hands is a sign of her growing into adulthood. That doesn't mean she has to quit dreaming of a better world, but it's time for her to start working on building it with her own hands. Since she was working on that anyway, she's perfectly fine with that. She just wishes she could give the glowstone back to Mide since the woman had liked it so much. But with time being frozen inside of the barrier, that would be impossible. Except for the fact that the cat Shanoa shows up again, and she's been able to come and go freely within Alexander with no problems. Since it can't really hurt to try, Round Rocks gives the cat the stone and lets her take it to her friend, while you all wonder if Mide will ever find her way out of Alexander. They do have access to every moment in time, so they may find one where they can step out and live their life without Alexander potentially destroying the world. But for now, Ishtola and Sid both have their own stuff to do, so they head off, but not before Estola hands you a book that Backrix has been looking for. Since you like delivering stuff, she figures that you won't mind. The goblin's happy to get the book, but he's surprised when he reads about a tribe from a long time ago, founded by two people who stepped out of a giant machine with a glowing stone in their hands, and their names were Dan and Mide. So apparently they found their perfect world somewhere deep in the past, and they managed to get Round Rox's gift too. This concludes the story of Alexander. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and donate to the channel so I can keep bringing you guys new content. Until next time, guys. Later. Recently, a loud roar shook the area, and according to Urianger, that roar came from an unknown Primal waking up. Since the Warrior of Light is kind of good at putting down Primals, he would obviously be called on because the Primal will wake up soon, and it'll cause a lot of problems once it does. Fortunately, someone's already started working on stopping the thing, and she wants your help. Since she's a member of the Scions, granted one that's always off doing her own thing, Minfilia told her that you'd help because volunteering you for stuff is what people tend to do. This person is waiting for you out in Wineport, so you head out there to meet her. Now this story takes place way back in a realm reborn, and the person you're meeting is Alice, from way back during that horrible era where she and Alphino dressed exactly the same. It's also only the second time you've seen her in game, and the first time you actually work with her, but she's of course already heard about you and how strong you are, and because of what she's trying to do, she knows she'll need that strength. Since the introductions are done, she gets on with telling you what's about to happen. When Dalamud fell, it not only caused the land's appearance to change, it did a lot of damage to the world's ether, causing it to clash at certain points underground, which made a lot of caves form. And one of those caves is located under Castrum Occidens and goes so deep that there's no telling what's down there. The Castrum operates as a research facility and a fortress, one that Gaius Van Belsar is using to study those caverns without anyone interfering, and if the Garleans are interested in something, it'd be stupid to ignore it. With each Primal you took down, Alice noticed shifts in the ether that came from under the Castrum, and it needs to be checked on as soon as possible because the ether patterns are very similar to the ones that had appeared right before the world-changing calamity. It's been 5 years since Louisoux channeled the power of the 12 to seal Bahamut away, but what he tried to do failed, and both he and the Primal vanished. Alice wants to find out what happened to her grandfather on that day, and what had caused the changes in the land after the fight. And she thinks those answers can be found in those caves, and she wants you to come with her. Normally she's fine with doing things on her own, but she knows what she can and can't do, and on her own she knows that she can't complete this mission. Since you helped her brother and the Scions, she figures that it'd be a good idea to see if you'd be willing to help her. You agree to help out, and the first thing she needs you to do is sneak into the Castrum and find a safe route into the caverns. When you find the path, she wants you to tell Jabraka, a soldier in Wineport who's also working with her. Since sneaking into an Imperial fortress is not new to the Warrior of Light, it's not exactly hard for him to find a way into the underground caverns. Jabraka is a servant of Alice's house, who became a member of the Maelstrom mainly to get information that she can use to help her mistress on her adventures. In other words, the woman's a spy, but none of that's your problem. If she gets caught and hanged, that's on her. All that matters is she goes and gets Alice, and the two of you head down into the tunnels. Saying the place is huge would be an understatement, and the giant corrupted ether crystals are all over the place. They appeared all over the world when the ether was altered by the shattered pieces of the artificial moon Dalamud crashing down. The moon itself was made by ancient Allegans to hold Bahamut, and years later the damage it did when it came crashing down can still be seen all around the world. And despite it having crashed 5 years ago, the defenses of Dalamud are still active, which is probably what the Garleans are after. That also means that you'll have to fight your way through them if you want to go any further, which is all in a day's work for the Warrior of Light. As the two of you head deeper into the cave, you see a massive wing that belonged to Bahamut. After Louisoux had tried to seal the Primal away and failed, it had disappeared, and apparently now you know where it went. But the thing that's bothering Alice is the fact that Bahamut hasn't vanished. Primals lose their physical form when they're beaten, but if Bahamut hasn't vanished, did Louisoux actually beat him? To answer that question, there's more exploring that needs to be done, so the two of you keep moving while someone watches you, someone who vanishes before you can see him. After fighting your way past a lot of elegant creations and riding an elevator down for what looks like miles, you and Louisoux find Bahamut's hand, which in comparison to the other members of the First Brood is huge. It's more proof that the Primal didn't lose his form after the calamity, which means the ether that would have been released on the Primal's death couldn't have been the cause of the changes that washed over the world. The caverns seem to go even deeper, so the two of you keep moving, only to get attacked by a dragon that's been fitted with some type of control collar. It's easy enough to deal with now, but it wasn't years ago when these fights were first made. With the dragon dead, Louisoux and the Warrior of Light come across a machine that Louisoux thinks she can figure out how to use. She's right, and after pouring some of her ether into it, it powers up and a wall opens, revealing Bahamut's head and heart both connected to a large machine, and the heart is pulsing, which means the dragon is very, very much alive. That also means that Louisoux died for nothing. There's too much that you don't know, so Louisoux figures that it'll be a good idea to leave for now, but not far from the dragon's head she sees two people, and one of them is her grandfather. She calls out to him, but he ignores her and leaves, and since there's nothing else to do, the two of you leave as well. Surprisingly enough, you pop out in northern Thanalan, quite a good distance away from where you went in, which is weird, but Louisoux is more concerned about her grandfather being alive and why he ignored her. This mission of hers gave her more questions to answer, so she figures it may be more comfortable to head back to the Waking Sands to figure things out, along with a little help from Urianger. Apparently around the time the two of you made it back to the surface, there was an etheric disturbance out in the Cartano Flats. There haven't been any primal sightings in that area, so it had to be Bahamut that the people were detecting. What they may have been sensing was the primal regenerating. For 5 years he's been slowly drawing in ether and using it to heal himself, which means if he's not dealt with, he could drain the land dry to restore himself, then pick up right where he left off by destroying the world. But it also looks like Louisoux is still around to help hold him off, but Louisoux won't know for sure until she talks to him. He went deeper into the cave, and since there are two more massive pieces of Dalamud that slammed into the ground, they could have made tunnels that will let you explore deeper into the area and track the man down. And Louisoux is not going to stop until she does, and of course you're going to help. Louisoux has still been working on the Bahamut and Louisoux problem, and Urianger has been talking to Rambros from the Sons of St. Coinach to see what he can figure out about Bahamut's prison. With Rambros being so knowledgeable about all things Allegan, he does know a little bit about it. Dalamud was made to gather sunlight and to channel it into the Crystal Tower. When the Allegans saw how powerful Bahamut's ether manipulating abilities were, they bound him to Dalamud to use as a power core. The devices that were linked to the half-dead Primal are called internment husks, and they bind Bahamut, keeping him from getting away, and they pour enough ether into him to keep him from losing his physical form. He's trapped, unable to die or escape from a prison that feeds on his own ether. The Primal had been trapped for centuries, but the prayer of their followers are the things that keep Primals in their physical form, which means the Allegan's machine must simulate that somehow. That means if all of the internment husks are turned off, then Bahamut should finally break down into ether. After a little bit of studying and searching, they figure out that there are 3 coils keeping Bahamut alive, and another piece of Dalamud with the same ether signature as the last one you explored was found in the 12's wood. There's a path inside from the North Shroud, and that should lead you to the second internment husk that needs to be shut down. Louisoux hopes the Warrior of Light will join her for another trip, and if you decide to tag along, you can tell her assistant Anael out near Falgord Float. She'll be heading there after she makes her own preparations, so she's hoping she'll see you there. Anael is one of Louisoux's assistants, who's worked her way up to lieutenant rank in the Twin Adders, so she could basically spy for Louisoux in the 12's wood. That position lets her do some things without being questioned, including doing a little investigating of the Dalamud fragment. From what she's seen, it's not all that different from the last one that you and Louisoux wandered through, complete with its own traps and guardians. Granted, she thinks you'll do better seeing it for yourself, and she has someone stationed there that can help you get a glimpse of the place, so you head off to meet him. Louisoux had told him to expect you, so he fills you in on what they found out. The Empire hadn't found this fragment, which meant no one had cleared a path to it, so all of their time has been spent doing that. They got a few glimpses inside, but all they know is that the master controls are at the bottom of the place behind a lot of Allegan defenses. So the only way to learn more is to explore the place whenever Louisoux decides to show up. Oddly enough, Alphino is the one who shows up first. Urianger had told him what the Warrior of Light and his sister were doing, and he came by to chat with you for a moment before you went into the second coil. He wanted to tell you that Alisay admired Louisoux even more than he did. Since the man died, she made it her personal mission to pick up where he left off and protect Eorzea. That's why she dove headfirst into the coil, but that's not what has Alphinaud worried. He doesn't want her mission to stop Bahamut to turn into a quest to save their dead grandfather. She needs a better reason to fight other than simply fulfilling someone else's dream, because he doesn't think that will be enough for her in the end. But he does think that traveling with you might help her find herself, since it did work wonders for him. But it won't help him if she finds out that he was monitoring her, so he wants you and Anael to keep it a secret that he was even there, since Alisay is kinda prone to violence. He leaves before she gets there, and once she arrives, the two of you dive into the second coil of Bahamut. Once the two of you get closer to the entrance, Alisay realizes that the corrupted ether warped the air in a way making it hard to see just how the area looks from far away. Up close is a much more dangerous place to try to walk through, but that's not going to slow her down. Not when there's a chance to save her grandfather. Saving her grandfather is at least second in her mind to fighting Bahamut, but it does seem like Alphinaud was right about where her focus lied. There's a lot of stuff blocking you from even getting into the moon fragment, but once the two of you get inside, you see someone in armor that everyone who was alive during the calamity would recognize. Neel Van Darnus, the White Raven, the man who caused the last calamity. But he's very dead, and when he hears Alisay say that name, he claims that's not who he is, and he's pretty insulted to be compared to that failure. He calls himself Neel Des Darnus, a name given to him by Bahamut, the being that Neel claims is the one true god. This guy is clearly very tempered, and he warns you that if you keep defiling his god's domain, he will kill you. Then he drops off of a very high cliff and vanishes. The whole encounter was strange, but Alisay expected weird, so the two of you hop down onto a massive elevator, where instead of elevator music, you have elegant defenses to keep you entertained. The Warrior of Light deals with them as well as the very creepy snake lady waiting at the end of your ride. With that over and done with, it's deeper down you go. There are paths everywhere, and they are dark, which of course lead to more horrible Allagan monstrosities. They said that Allagans were really good at making all types of chimeras and such, and literally millions of the things were housed inside of Dalamud to keep the Allagans' enemies from releasing Bahamut. That was likely a deterrent for the Mericidians, who had summoned the Warring Triad in their battle with the Allagans, which led to the Void Scent being summoned with the power of the Crystal Tower and so on and so forth. While those defenses were meant for them, they work just as well at slowing you down too. But the Warrior of Light cuts a path through the defenses that are in his way, and he and Alisay make their way down to the heart of the coil, to a place that looks exactly like the fields of Cartno where Neel Van Darnus died, complete with a floating Dalamud overhead. Neel is there, and he claims that the place will be your grave since you kept destroying Bahamut's things. He starts to channel the power to do something probably nasty to you, but Alisay shoots first, knocking off his helmet and revealing that this person is actually a woman, which the real Neel definitely wasn't. Apparently when the man had died and his soul was on its way to the ethereal sea, Bahamut had snatched his ether and remade him into the woman you see before you. He ordered this remade Neel to destroy his enemies and gave her the power to do just that. It gives her a much more dragon-like form, and she turns all of that power on you. When you finally bring her down, the illusion that made the area look like the calamity fades, and the woman not only turns back into her normal form, but she's no longer tempered. She also claims to be the real Neel Van Darnus now, but she knows that the body she's in isn't her real one, and her mind's a little cloudy, but she refuses to be tempered again. Normally it's all but impossible to get untempered, which means Bahamut must have released Neel since she's near death and useless to him now. Neel thinks it's funny that she ended up being controlled by one of the creatures she had hoped to get rid of, but tempered or not, she knows with absolute certainty that she had initiated the Meteor Project on her own. Before she fades away, Alisay wants the woman to tell her what really happened to the world and her grandfather after the calamity. Neel thinks it's funny that Louisoux's grandkid had a hand in her death and release from the Primal's control, and she lets Alisay know that she'll get her answers if she keeps exploring the coils, but she probably won't like what she finds. Before she can say more, a spear made of light stabs her in the chest and puts an end to it for good. With her dead and out of the way, the two of you head off to finish your mission, and what you find is Bahamut has been regenerating a lot faster than you all had expected. That's kinda bad, but Alisay hopes that turning off this machine will slow down the process, at least enough to give you time to find the last one. She shuts it down and the two of you get ready to head back to the surface, only for Louisoux to show up and attack Alisay. He wants her to stop what she's doing because he won't let her keep interfering with Bahamut. She of course refuses to stop, so he goes to kill her, but the Warrior of Light steps in the way. The fact that he was really gonna kill her, that and the glowing red eyes, lets her know that Louisoux is just as tempered as Nail had been, and he decides to let you leave for now, but he promises that he will kill you both if you come back. With that, he leaves, and Alice is forced to admit that her grandfather is truly dead before the two of you leave and head back to the Waking Sands to let Urianger know what's happened and the plan for what to do next. After hearing about the fake Louisoux and Nail that you had to fight, Urianger thinks it may be for the best if Alice left this mission to the Warrior of Light, but of course there's no way she'd abandon the job. There is something that she's worried about. She doesn't know if Nail Van Darnus and Louisoux are the only two thralls that Bahamut had working for him. Nail had said something about Bahamut's beloved children that Alice had assumed was meant for the Guardians of Dalamud, but she could have been talking about other mortals that the Primal had enslaved. If that's the case, then you have to deal with them before you can shut down the last coil, because if even one of them lives, they'll just be able to summon Bahamut again, and she's willing to wipe them all out, even if that means having to put down her grandfather with her own hands. Alice has been having some problems with her mission with the cause of Bahamut, and she decides to ask Urianger for a bit of his overly complicated sage advice. Bahamut's regenerating pretty fast, and there are still 2 internment husks that need to be turned off. She's found where they are, but she doesn't know how to get to them. Once you do manage to figure out how to get inside, you'll still have to deal with all of the Allergan tech, as well as whatever other guards Bahamut has enthralled. That includes Louisoux. But those problems only matter once you find a way inside. Urianger figures that the best way to do that is for Alice to take the Warrior of Light with her to the fragments of Dalamud, since him just being there tends to cause things to happen. While the two of you do that, Urianger will try to figure out a way inside using his own methods. Since she trusts the Warrior of Light, she agrees. There are 2 remaining fragments of Dalamud, one in eastern Thanalan and another near Mordona. Alice's left some of her people in each of the areas looking for a way inside. It's been a while, so they may have gotten lucky, so the two of you head to see Dex by the burning wall. The man's excited to meet the Warrior of Light, but unfortunately he hasn't managed to find a way into the fragment. He can see the entrance, but there's no way to get through all of the corrupted ether crystals. Since the Thanalan path is a bust, the two of you head off to Mordona to see if Sinis has had a little bit of better luck. That may not be the case, since apparently Dex has lost contact with his brother. Since there are a lot of monsters in the area, he could very well be dead, so the Warrior of Light and Alice race off to hopefully save him. The man was injured but not dead, but sadly the piece of Dalamud near him is impenetrable too. While Alice's assistants haven't found a way to make it into the place, a call from Urianger lets the two of you know that he's found one. He wants the two of you to meet him at the cerulean processing plant in northern Thanalan so he can show you what he means. There are no fragments of Dalamud in the area, but there is a path inside, one that the two of you have used before every time you'd come out of the coils. An ethereal stream had taken the two of you out of the coils, and Urianger has figured out that the same stream that you rode out away from the first internment husk on is connected to each of the others through a giant machine. Him and his assistant figured that out, as well as how to travel to one of the areas that you hadn't explored yet. You'll be using a modified aetherite for your trip, but since it's untested, the trip could kill you both, or have you reappear with swapped body parts or a whole lot of other unpleasant things. That's a risk that Alice is willing to take, as is Urianger's assistant, who turns out to be Alphino. She's not happy that Urianger told her brother about her mission, and she promises to have words with him later once Bahamut is dealt with. He's cool with that, but since Louisoux is both of the twins' grandfather, he thought it only fair if Alphino knew what was going on too. As long as he doesn't interfere with her continuing her grandfather's mission of protecting Eorzea, she doesn't really care. But Alphino is still worried about the fact that she's fighting for someone else's goal and doesn't have a clue what she really wants for herself. Alice obviously gets angry at him for questioning her, something that she's only slightly grown out of over time. But what she doesn't understand is that Alphino isn't against her fight, he just wants her to be able to answer the question of why she's doing it, and while it may not seem all that important, it is, especially in a world filled with primals and tempering. The two of them would argue back and forth about it forever, which is what siblings tend to do, but Bahamut regenerating is a more serious problem, so the twins stop arguing, and Alice agrees to let Alphino tag along, as long as he follows orders, so the three of you make your way into the final coil of Bahamut. It's Alphino's first time seeing the insides of Dalamud, so naturally he's excited, but Alice is just happy that the little teleportation trick sent you all to a working internment husk. Since there's no telling how much more Bahamut has regenerated since the last time you had all been there, that means you need to shut it down quickly. There are plenty of containers holding Allagan creations, so it's likely that this trip won't be any easier than the last ones. The monsters are just as brutal as they always were, but as the Warrior of Light cuts a path through them, the group comes across some Allagan containers holding some very unexpected creatures, dragons. A lot of them. They knew that the Allagans had figured out how to control dragons, but they hadn't thought they had locked away so many. They had so many other guardians that they wouldn't have really needed the dragons, but that's not what they have them for. It doesn't take long for Louisoux to realize that the reason the Allagans had so many dragons imprisoned was to use them to maintain Bahamut's physical form. That means all of those dragons have to die, or the threat of Bahamut won't end with his death. It's also likely that the dragon woke up and tried to destroy everything, because mortals seem to keep finding ways to do cruel things to the winged lizards that are the size of buildings. The fact that everyone keeps messing with them sounds dumber and dumber when you really pay attention to just how big the lead dragons are. Regardless of the fact that the Bahamut problem was brought on by mortals, he still needs to be put down, and since the machine keeping him locked up is likely the same one keeping the dragons alive, turning it off will solve both problems. So the three of you keep moving deeper into the coil. When you all reach Bahamut, you see that he is very close to being fully awake, so Louisoux goes to turn off the internment husk. As a surprise to no one, Louisoux appears to block your path. Louisoux has finally accepted the fact that he's not really her grandfather, but that's all talk because she's still affected by his words, especially when he questions her cause. He says that they only think of Bahamut as a villain because of what happened in the moments when he broke free, but they don't know the whole story. During the Third Astral Era, the Allagans had invaded Mericidia. Since they couldn't beat them, the Mericidians prayed to Bahamut, reviving him as a powerful god, but instead of defeating the Allagans, he got imprisoned by them. Louisoux had summoned the 12 to help with his people's problems in a very similar way that the Mericidians had summoned Bahamut. So his question is, why were the 12 celebrated while Bahamut is hated? It's hypocrisy to him, even though it probably has something to do with the fact that the 12 didn't try to kill the people, which kinda ruins his argument. But after what the Allagans have done, the only way that the dragons will ever know peace is if the mortals are wiped out entirely. And after everything they've done to the dragons, this mind-controlled Louisoux thinks that wiping out the mortals would be justice. That's the complete opposite of what the real Louisoux believed, since he believed that people were always worth saving, but now he thinks that it was foolish to believe that mortals even deserve to be saved at all. They can't stand together on anything since they start out by arguing about what direction they should face. The one thing that history shows is that if there's anything for mortals to argue about, they will find it. He even points out how the twins argue about everything and use their resources to guide people into doing what they want, which makes them no different than the Allagans. He had given the twins matching grimoire to bring them closer together, but even that had been a waste of effort. Alphinaud admits that Louisoux is right about them, but hearing his grandfather talk about how bad mortals are when the man was the one who cared the most about people just seems fake. He wants to know if Louisoux really believes what he's saying, or is it all because he's a thrall of Bahamut, or is it because of a third option? Has Louisoux himself become a primal? Louisoux hadn't even thought of that possibility, but it seems to be the truth. Somehow during the fight with Bahamut, Louisoux acquired the powers of a primal himself, but if you want to know how, you'll have to fight him, so he turns into his primal form, that of a phoenix, and attacks, which is why the Warrior of Light is there. He faces off against Louisoux, who is very much alive and not a creation of Bahamut at all, and manages to bring him down after quite a few slashes with his sword. Just like when you beat Nail, beating Louisoux broke him free from Bahamut's control. He is dying, but at least he can spend the last bit of time that he has as himself. The twins are happy to get a true reunion with their grandfather, although Alphinaud does feel a little bad for how he had talked to the man while he was tempered. Louisoux wasn't offended, and he's actually proud of the boy for figuring out what he'd become, which leads him to tell you all what really happened in the fight with Bahamut. When Bahamut had broken free from Dalamud during the Battle of Cartano, Louisoux had channeled the power of the 12 to help him make an ether prison for Bahamut. It didn't work. The Primal was too strong, so he broke free. Louisoux didn't have much else that he could do other than use everything he had to do as much damage as he could and hope that the problem can be dealt with permanently by someone else in the future. But things didn't turn out like that. When the ether prison he had made was broken, the scattered ether filled the sky and combined with all of the prayers of everyone who was fighting below. Them praying for a savior, while Louisoux wished for a way to save the land from the calamity, combined with the ether and turned him into the Primal Phoenix, which is a symbol of rebirth. Since he was fully powered up, he hit Bahamut with everything he had and destroyed his body, which caused the ether to fall into the land to start the process of healing the world. That's why the game was called A Realm Reborn, and why this story was clearly supposed to be a part of the MSQ. Louisoux thought that everything was finished, so he let go of his new power so it could go back to the land too, but Bahamut wasn't dead, so as the power left Louisoux, Bahamut took him. His body still had enough of Phoenix's power to keep Bahamut alive and start his regeneration, and that's where his service to Bahamut began. That's why Eorzea didn't heal the way that it was supposed to. While there are so many areas with corrupted ether crystals, it all comes back to the conflict between Louisoux and Bahamut. And since the Primal is still alive, he has been eating the land's ether. He ate everything that Louisoux had released and is sucking it all out of the world so that he can fully restore his giant primal form and finish what he had started. Normally he wouldn't have been able to survive with all of the damage he had taken, but since the elegant technology of Dalamud was helping to hold him in place, as long as any piece of him survived, he could live. The pieces of Dalamud have been slowly digging their way through the ground toward their prisoner, which is why there are so many pathways underground that no one knew about. And had Alisay not been looking, no one would have discovered this until Bahamut wiped them all out. Since he can't do it himself, Louisoux tells the Warrior of Light to finish off Bahamut, because if he recovers, he won't just kill all mortals. Even the dragons won't survive the calamity he'll cause. Of course, the Warrior of Light agrees, so Louisoux turns off the internment husk and opens a portal that will take you all to the last one. He's finally fading away, but as a last act after telling the twins that they need to find their own purpose in life and reason to fight, especially Alisay, he gives them the last bit of power that he has as a semi-primal and vanishes. With him gone, the three of you head to the final husk, but the moment Alisay tries to turn it off, Bahamut, in his incomplete form, still has enough power to attack. Lucky for the twins, they have just enough power between the two of them, since Louisoux buffed them up a bit, to hold off the attack while the Warrior of Light attacks Bahamut's core. The Primal has a smaller version of himself in there acting as a last line of defense, but because this wasn't done way back when the fight was supposed to happen, he gets wrecked. With Bahamut beaten, Alisay turns off the last machine that's keeping him alive, and the Primal that reshaped the world as well as the dragons that were keeping him there are all finally put to rest. Now that it's done, Alisay wants to know if Alphinaud had always known what their grandfather had become. He had a theory, but he wasn't positive. He had thought it was possible after hearing some of the stories people had told about what they'd seen at Cartno, and that was why he'd been worried that Alisay may have been being tempered by him, and he'd hoped he could help prevent it. It turns out that she was fine, so he doesn't have anything to worry about, but he does want to know if she plans on telling people what they found out about the Primal Phoenix. She won't, because she knows that if she does, people would try to summon him to fix the world, which would suck all of the ether out that's being used to heal it, which would do the exact opposite of what they want. She won't have her grandfather being brought back as an ether-draining primal who would destroy the world that he had died to protect, so the story will die with the three of you. With that settled, you all leave the coils for the last time, and even though she doesn't plan on telling the world about her grandfather, she will recommend that they seal off the fragments of Dalamud, just in case there's something there that can give people a hint of what happened. Well, Alphinaud will handle that part since he's better at politics, while Alisay heads off down her own path, and she promises that even though the world won't know how you saved them from Bahamut and freed Louisoux, she will never forget, and the next time you meet, she hopes to be an equal to the Warrior of Light. This leads us to her becoming the Alisay that we all know and love today, and it also concludes the story of the binding coils of Bahamut. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later. In Mordona, you run into an oddly dressed but strangely familiar man who lets you know about a project going on in the area. Being a curious or maybe just a nosy individual, you go to see what it's all about. Rambros is surprised to see you since the only people who were supposed to know about the project were members of the Sons of St. Coinach, but since you're there, he decides to put you to work. However, the excavation that they're working on is dangerous, so if things go wrong, you might die. Of course, that doesn't do anything but make you excited, and the sight of your friend Sid makes you even more so. Rambros is surprised to hear that you two know each other, but Sid is more than happy to have you along even though you still have no idea what you signed up for. The Warrior of Light is the poster child for leaping before you look. So Sid breaks things down for you since you like to sign contracts before you actually read them. The group known as the Sons of St. Coinoc are working on finding the secrets of the ancient Allegan Empire, and their current job is on track to reveal more about the ancient civilization than ever before. And while you're no scientist, you have dealt with a lot of ancient Allegan tech, including the Ultima weapon. Gaulians hadn't built it, Nero had simply turned it on, so you have a more hands-on experience with Allegan tech than most, even if your experience lies solely in breaking it. In Mordona, there's a large Allegan building called the Crystal Tower, and after seeing the destructive power of Allegan relics like the Ultima weapon and the artificial moon Dalamud, it seems like a good idea to study the tower and learn what it does before the thing falls into the wrong hands. That's why Sid contacted the Sons of St. Coinoc to set up an expedition into the tower. The building had been buried for thousands of years, but it was unearthed during the Calamity. It was only a matter of time before someone went to see what it was, but the place's defenses are still active, and anything trying to pass through the barriers gets blown up. The barriers are produced by 8 statues, and you won't be able to explore the tower without dealing with them, and you can't fly over it because anything that tries is shot out of the sky. Rambros admits that his people are not built to handle dangerous situations, so when they do get access to the tower, they'll need an adventurer to do all of the heavy lifting. And of course, you're eager to do it. There are a lot of things that need to be done, so I'm pretty sure you've already guessed what's coming next. Fetch quests, and a lot of them. The defenses of the tower each use one of the 4 primary elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. So Sid believes that the crystals matching the particular element of the force fields could reflect the energy of the barriers and cause them to overload. You will need the most pure crystals of each element as possible, just like the ones the beast tribes use to summon their primals. So now you get to rob the beast tribes, and the Eorzeans wonder why the different tribes hate them so much and keep summoning their gods to fight you. Being the good little peon that you are, you travel around Eorzea, liberating various members of the different tribes of both their property and their lives. The great hero you are, murdering people for the sake of science. After gathering all of the crystals, it's on to the next step. As they are, the crystals are useless. They need to be cut and polished before they can work, and that process takes more, very specific materials that you have to fetch. You got 4 crystals of different elements. Now you have to do the same for ether sand, required to make them useful. This isn't something you can find easily due to how rare the ether sand is, so Rambros has put in an order for some at the Goldsmiths Guild in Ul'dah. That way, whenever some does arrive, he'll already have claimed it. He sends you to see if they manage to get any, and he gives you the money to pay for it, but he seems to forget that all the teleporting around you've been doing costs money too. Fortunately for me, I'm a crafter, so Gil isn't really a problem, but he didn't know that. Lucky for you, you get to the Goldsmiths Guild shortly after a shipment of fire-aspected ether sand arrives. However, Biggs is there trying to convince the guild to sell him the sand for whatever project he's working on. Biggs wasn't expecting to see you there, and he's even more shocked to find out that you're working with his boss. He knew Sid was working on something dealing with Allegan relics, but he hadn't thought to ask what since he and Wedge were so busy working on a new airship. They've built a prototype, but it needs all 4 different types of ether sand to run. So he's after the same thing that you are, but since the Sons of St. Coinoc reserved the sand, you got dibs. Since you're taking what he needs, Biggs wants you to let him join in on your assignment. And to show that he's not useless, he lets you know where to start looking for another bit of sand. There's a peddler in northern Thanalan who is said to deal in earth-aspected ether sand, and Wedge is in the process of hunting him down. Wedge hired an adventurer to be his bodyguard and headed out to Camp Blue Fog, so you head there to find him. You find his bodyguard at the camp, but no Wedge. She's more than happy to tell you the story, although she doesn't seem really happy at all. She and Wedge were looking for the peddler of ether sand just like Biggs told you, but when they found the guy, he'd been robbed by bandits. She and Wedge snuck into the bandits' camp to try to get the sand back. To make a long story short, they sucked at stealth, were seen, and had to run. She and Wedge were separated and she hasn't seen him since. He may still be in the Mithril mine, but she thinks that it's more than likely he's dead by now. Not wanting to abandon your friend, you head to the mine where the bandits are stationed, and you find him cowering in a corner trying to psych himself up to make an escape. When he sees you, he starts blabbering on and on about why he's there and such, Stuff that, if you didn't already know, it should have been discussed at a different time. I never understand why people start holding casual conversations in the heart of enemy territory, like the world's just gonna pause until you remember that you need to get out of danger. Whatever. On the plus side, Wedge did find the ether sand, but he dropped it while he was running for his life. Instead of letting him wander around the bandit camp, you track down the Earth aspected ether sand and return to Wedge, only for him to decide to join you and Sid at the Crystal Tower too. You bring the 2 bits of sand back to Rambros, and Sid gets back to work on the crystals, although he can't believe that you actually got your hands on any of the sand, let alone 2 of the 4 you needed. Hearing that you got help from Biggs and Wedge is the last thing he expected. As for the wind and water ether sand that you still need, Rambros has made some arrangement that he doesn't seem happy about. He had asked a Charlian friend of his to go to Gridania and get what he needed, but the man just disappeared. Which isn't all that odd for him, but he still doesn't know if something happened to him or not. But there's no time to search for him either. Instead, Rambros sends you to Gridania to see if the master of the markets knows where you can buy the remaining materials. He hasn't seen any ether sand on the market board in years, but he knows where you could mine for the water sand. However, it's so dangerous that he wouldn't recommend it. As if that matters to you. The spot is an Earth's gift, but the place is inhabited by a very large hog that murders any and everyone that goes there. When you get to the place, you find the giant hog is already dead, and a voice taunts you for being so slow. The mysterious man has taken the ether sand that you needed, but he decides to make a race out of getting the wind sand. A group of Ixal in the Northern Shroud have some that they keep for purifying their crystals. Your mysterious friend tells you to hurry there before he takes what you want, and you rush off to the Ixali logging grounds. You deal with some Ixali who are not happy that you're robbing them, and you take the wind ether sand. Your mysterious watcher was so excited by your performance that he admits that he didn't even try to get the sand himself, and since he enjoyed seeing you in battle so much, he decides to leave the water ether sand for you as payment for entertaining him. The guy is clearly a bit touched in the head. Just because he claims the whole point of his test was to document the accomplishments and skills of a mighty adventurer doesn't mean he's not crazy. Regardless, you have everything Sid needs to break the barrier around the Crystal Tower, so you head back to Mordona with your prize. Sid works his magic and gets his devices ready shortly before Biggs and Wedge arrive to lend a hand. Another person shows up not long after, and although this is your first time seeing him, you recognize his voice. The man who challenged you to the race for the ether sand turns out to be a Mikode named Graha. He also happens to be the one who Rambros had sent to find the sand in the first place, so basically he just pawned off his job onto you. He's been assigned to Rambros' project as an observer, and despite his weirdness, he's not a bad guy. After naming your ragtag group of friends Noah after a famous Allegan Archmage, you set off to see if Sid's devices are gonna work or kill you. Sid, not wanting to risk anyone else's life to see if his projects work, is the first to test it. It works quite well, destroying the first barrier and prompting the rest of you to move forward. With the outer defenses down, Sid suggests that you and a few other adventurers go into the tower first, because if the defenses on the outside were that strong, then there's no telling what's waiting inside. Graha is not happy about it since it makes it difficult to record your actions if he's outside while you're smashing things, but his knowledge of ancient civilizations will be useful in helping Sid study the broken towers to see how they functioned. He admits that Sid's right, but before you set off, he lets you know that the maze surrounding the base of the tower is called the Labyrinth of the Ancients, and all you should do is take down any hostile things inside before you call him and Sid so they can figure out how to move into the tower proper. The time has come for you to finally begin your journey into the Crystal Tower. Inside, you face all manners of creatures, from void scent to dragons, but you and your friends overcome it all until you come face to face with a living Allegan, General Phlegethon. In ancient times, he led a host of revolutions against the Allegan Empire, and he was seen as a hero by the common people, but he was eventually captured by the Empire and was experimented on, turning him into a mindless slave. After ending the general, Sid, Graha, Biggs, and Wedge all show up to admire both your handiwork and the impressive structure. Based off of the findings of the students of Baldessian, the Crystal Tower was built to absorb the energy of the sun like a giant solar panel. Graha even knew who Phlegethon was, something he figured out just from hearing what kind of weapon the giant man used. Allegan history is his favorite subject, and one of the things he read said that the Crystal Tower is guarded by heroes of the old world who were resurrected and augmented by Allegan technology, something he could have told you before you went inside. But you didn't die, and you have cleared a path to the tower, so you all head back to the camp to plan what you're going to do next. And I mean that in the literal sense, because we all know that you're going to be doing all of the heavy lifting. Back at the camp, after giving a play-by-play of your adventure in the labyrinth to Rambros, he takes what you told him and combines it with what Graha discovered to come up with a full analysis of what's been accomplished so far. The expedition is going well considering the fact that it just started. The encounter with the Allegan general inside the labyrinth along with the other defenses is a little bit disturbing, however, and it proves Cid's earlier fears, that the calamity didn't simply reveal the Crystal Tower, it woke it up. The tower's secrets are far too dangerous to share with the world. Short of blowing the place up, the only way to make sure it doesn't end up in the wrong hands is to find a way to turn it back off, this time for good. But if you want to turn it off, you have to figure out how it works, which means you'll have to go into the tower itself, and you know that'll be dangerous, probably even more dangerous than the labyrinth. With that in mind, Rambros decides to study the tower's defenses before sending you inside, and of course Cid and his crew are up for the challenge. While they work, Graha decides to go and train his body so he'll be strong enough to join you in the battle this time, but Rambros stops him and sends him to help Cid. He pouts like a baby, but he will do as he's asked. So everyone heads off to do what they need to prepare for your trip into the circus tower. While you're all busy, the man who told you about the expedition in the first place goes to survey the wreckage of the tower's external barrier. He's quite impressed with Cid's handiwork, and the path you cleared into the tower allows him to detect a power at the top, something that's even more powerful than the ultimate weapon. And he should know, since he turns out to be the Garlean scientist who had worked under Gaius on the ultimate weapon project, Nero. When you make it back to the camp, Rambros lets you know that they haven't made much progress with the tower. They found a lot of new things in the labyrinth, but they still haven't been able to get to the tower. The entrance to Circus Tower is guarded by very advanced technology that they haven't been able to get through, and until they figure out how to get inside, there's not much for you to do. As luck would have it, two oddly dressed individuals called Unai and Doga arrive at the camp before you leave. They say that they were sent by the students of Baldesion to help, but Rambros hadn't gotten any messages saying they were coming, and with the incident at the Isle of Val, mainly the explosion of magic that moved the island somewhere else entirely, the students of Baldesion have more important things to worry about. And those worries can be summed up in one word: Eureka. For those of you who don't know about it, you will. But that is a story for another day. Doga assumes that the incident is the reason why the message didn't reach Rambros, but he promises that they are there to help. Graha's eye, the red one, begins to ache, and although he dismisses it as nothing, Unai notices that his eye is the same as theirs. The red eyes are a trait unique to Allegan royalty, and it has been passed down in Graha's family for generations, which explains his fascination with the Allegans. He's a descendant of their race. Only one child of every generation is born with the Allegan eye, and his search for knowledge has been all about finding out what it means and why he only has one. So he's more than eager to hear anything that the newcomers have to say. Sadly, they don't know much other than the fact that those born with those eyes are bound to the fate of Alec, which is why Graha has been drawn to the ancient empire, and it's the reason why they are there. Since it can't hurt to let them help, Rambros welcomes them to the group and takes you all to see what you can learn about the entrance to Circus Tower. Cid's waiting by a massive door, and after the newcomers are introduced, he breaks down what's going on. The large door leads to the Circus Tower, but it's sealed and there's no way to break through. He's used everything from a pickaxe to a cannon, and nothing's even left a mark on it. The only hint they have on how to open the door is a device on the door with a man and woman carved into it. But for all they know, the device could be decoration or just a fancy doorbell. The two newcomers simply walk up to the door, lift their hands, and poof, it opens. Clearly they are more than they claim, something you should have picked up on from their full set of Allegan gear, but before they can explain, Nero shows up. Cid's shocked that the man's still alive after the battle at the Praetorium, and Nero doesn't blame him for being uneasy about him being there since he did try to kill you with a really big hammer last time he saw you. But he's no longer welcome in Garlemald. After his failure with the ultimate weapon, the 14th Legion is defunct, and if any of them go home, they'll probably be executed. Since Nero likes being alive, he's been wandering around Eorzea. He ended up hearing about what Cid was working on and decided to come and join him. As a sign of his willingness to work with you, he reveals what he knows about Unai and Doga. The Crystal Tower was a symbol of ancient Allegan power, and access was only given to royalty and a few others. From what Nero learned, only people with royal blood can open the door. The Emperor and his heirs were literally living keys. Unai and Doga are clones of those heirs. They didn't want to lie to you, but without proof, if they had come out and said what they were, you probably would have thought they were crazy. They have a lot more to tell you, so you all head back out away from the tower to talk, and Nero goes to follow you, although Cid's not happy about it even after the man gives him an Allegan tombstone filled with information that the 14th Legion had gathered about the ancient empire. Once everyone is gathered, Unai and Doga tell you everything, and to understand it all requires a bit of a history lesson. The Allegan Empire had reached its peak long before they were made. At that time, the Crystal Tower stood, absorbing the energy of the sun and powering the entirety of the empire. But the ease of life that the tower brought caused the empire to grow stagnant. Without a strong leader, the empire became a shadow of its former self. And wanting to restore its nation, a scientist named Amon made it his mission to return Allag to his former glory. And he believed that only one man could do it, so he worked to resurrect the founder of the empire, Emperor Xande. As part of the experiment, Amon made clones of the Emperor's descendants. The Unai and Doga standing before you are a part of that very experiment. Historical texts talked about the reign of two emperors named Xande, and everyone believed that the second was someone named after the first, but no one had ever guessed that they were both the same man. But Amon succeeded in resurrecting Xande, and he did restore the empire, but he wanted more. In his first life, Xande had wanted to bring the entire world under Allegan rule. He failed the first time, but since he was given a second chance, he has no intention of failing again. Knowing that he needed more power to achieve his goal, Xande sought the power of darkness. He transformed the Crystal Tower into a research facility to help him study and harness this new power. Cid remarks that it's fortunate that all of this happened so long ago that it's no longer a threat, but Doga shatters your hopes. Emperor Xande is still alive and well inside of Circus Tower, and he's not happy that his empire fell. Drawing on the power of darkness takes a lot of energy, too much even for the Crystal Tower. To increase its power, the moon Dalamud was made and launched into the sky to draw in the sun's energy and channel it into the tower. Unfortunately, they miscalculated, and a surge of energy caused an earthquake that caused the calamity that brought about the Fourth Umbral Era and destroyed the Allegan Empire. But as the Crystal Tower sank into the earth, Amon used magic to stop time from flowing inside the tower's walls. Everyone inside, the Emperor included, were all put to sleep, and they stayed that way until Dalamud was messed with during the Meteor Project, which caused the tower to reappear and Xande to awaken. His first act was to summon the darkness that he hungered for, and like so many others, he was corrupted by it. And even though his empire is long dead, he still plans on conquering the whole world. That is why Unai and Doga exist, to fulfill the wishes of the original Unai and Doga who they were cloned from, and kill Xande before he destroys the world. When they woke in the tower, they realized that they couldn't beat Xande on their own, so they went out to hunt for allies. And because they saw you fight your way through the labyrinth, they know that you can help them beat the Emperor. Of course, saving the world once again falls on your shoulders. Only this time, you get to face off against the man who founded the greatest empire in history, and his soldiers, including a scientist who not only figured out how to revive the dead, but managed to stop time itself. Inside of the tower, you face off against the scientist Amon's experiments, like Scylla, a former Allegan archmage who Amon tricked into undergoing one of his experiments. He had told her that she would end up with eternal life when he was done with her, but when she woke from the procedure, he had replaced her head with a pack of wild dogs. That should not be funny, but it kind of is. I have a messed up sense of humor. There are also more clones of Unai and Doga that you have to contend with, as well as Glacia Labolas, a loyal commander of the Imperial Honor Guard who Amon successfully granted eternal life to, until you poke him with a lot of sharp things to end all of his living. You then have the pleasure of ending Amon himself, before coming face to face with Xande. After taking down the Emperor, Unai and Doga decide how they will seal off the tower for good, while Nero, obviously, plans some mischief of his own. They can either separate the tower from the outside world, or block its ability to produce energy, turning it into nothing more than a shiny building. She leaves it up to you to decide, but first she and Doga have to deal with the rift that opened above the throne after Xande fell. The rift is a portal into the void, the world of darkness as the Allegans called it. You may know it better as the 13th Shard, the one that the Ascians accidentally destroyed when they first began their attempts at rejoining all the shards together. And the darkness Xande was trying to channel was, of course, an army of Voidsent. Xande had made a magical pact with the Voidsent leader. In exchange for them working for him, he would open a void gate that would give them free access to the source, your world. Meaning, in short, Voidsent would no longer have to make pacts with mages or get summoned into lesser bodies to get here. They would be able to come and go as they pleased. Having fought countless Voidsent, you should know that having an entire planet full of them coming to visit would not be a good idea. Even though Xande is dead, the contract he made has not been broken. But since the clones share his bloodline, they can end the deal. They reach out to seal the rift, and while they work, Nero's device begins to go haywire as something more powerful than anything he's ever seen approaches. From within the rift, a voice says that the covenant will not be broken so easily before an army of clones appear, sparking a vision from the echo. That really needs to stop happening when fighting's about to start. You see Xande sitting on his throne in front of a small group of clones talking about how Mera City has been taken and it won't be long before everything is under Allegan rule. But he still sees visions of his death and the void he floated in when his life came to an end. And despite all of his power, he's scared to die again, knowing that all that he's accomplished will mean nothing once he's gone. It's at that moment that he decides to destroy everything. If everything ends in nothing anyway, he'll make sure that he doesn't experience it alone. To bring about the end, he tells his people to draw more power into the tower so he can allow the cloud of darkness full access to the world so she can consume it all. You bounce out of the vision in the middle of a full-scale battle. Sid and the others are holding off the clones, but more and more keep coming. All of them are being controlled by a massively powerful Voidsent that reaches out of the rift and snatches Unai and Doga. Nero, wanting to master the power of darkness himself and needing the clones to do it, rushes forward to save them, only to be captured and pulled into the rift with them. From within the rift, the cloud of darkness speaks, letting you know that she intends to consume the light and return your world to the void before the rift closes and the clones collapse. Not knowing what else to do, you all leave the tower to see if Rambros has any ideas. He's shocked to hear about all that happened, but he's positive that the rift that opened was a void gate. Geniuses really have a knack for stating the obvious. There are a lot of different types of Voidsent, and the more powerful the creature, the larger the gate has to be for them to come through. To let something as powerful as the cloud of darkness through will require a massive gate unlike any that had ever been made before. To put things into perspective the best way I can, the cloud of darkness is probably the equivalent of Eden, but where Eden emitted a flood of light on the first, the cloud of darkness obviously emitted a flood of darkness. I am going to have to do some research to find out just why the Voidsent are so much more intelligent than the Sin Eaters. I mean, they're a stupid Voidsent, like those floating eyeballs, for instance. But between Diabolos, Ferdiad, Skatha, Lilith, and the Cloud of Darkness, Voidsent are clearly more evolved than their Light Ether counterparts. And it could be because the Sin Eaters have only existed for about 100 years, while if time sped up on the 13th Shard the same way it did on the first, there's no telling how many thousands of years have passed since the first Voidsent came about. But that's just a theory. In any case, Rambros doesn't know how to help your friends. There are no documented cases of people entering the void. It's possible that your friends died the minute they were pulled through the rift. Regardless, Graha refuses to give up on saving Unai and Doga. Not only because he feels connected to them because of his eye, but if you don't save them, there will be no way to break the bargain Xande made with the cloud. Sid agrees, mainly because if you leave Nero where he is, there's no telling what kind of trouble he could cause. Honestly, even though he would never admit it, he still considers Nero a friend. So they all get to work on figuring out how to get your friends back. With so many geniuses working on the problem, you know it won't take long for them to solve it. Sadly, their research into how to save your friends reveals something else. The Crystal Tower is still absorbing energy, and without Unai and Doga, there's no way to stop that either. From what Nero's tombstone told them, in ancient times, Allegan royalty had a method of giving their blood to others. That was the only reason Amon and the others could even control the tower, since they weren't royalty. You don't have that ability, and since the tower has built up so much energy, blowing it up will cause an immeasurable amount of damage to the world, maybe even worse than the last calamity. Graha does have an idea. Since the energy is being absorbed to open a void gate anyway, you can use the energy to open a gate of your own that will let you pass into the world of darkness. Cid is already working on the project, and in true Cid fashion, he's already done. With time slipping away, you all head back to the tower. Cid has his team power up his machine, and a portal into the world of darkness opens. However, it's not stable, and it won't be open for long. Cid decides to stay behind to keep the gate open for as long as he can while you go to rescue your friends. But this time, Graha decides to come with you. He's felt himself changing since he met the clones. Something's been bothering him, something that he can't remember, and he feels that it's forcing him to see all of this through with his own eyes. So it's into the world of darkness you both go. Void scent litter every corner of the darkness-covered world, forcing you to do battle with everything from clones of Xande himself to a massive 5-headed dragon that Amon had built to face off against the dragon legions of Mericidia. Seems like your friends weren't the only things that the cloud of darkness drew into the void. Finally, you come face to face with the cloud of darkness herself, and you manage to push her back long enough for Nero to show up, carrying an unconscious Unai with Doga by his side. The wounds he had taken had allowed the darkness of the void to disrupt the ether of his body, making him look like a purple glow stick. The contract that Xande made with the cloud protects Unai and Doga from suffering the same fate. The cloud can't kill them herself, which is why she brought them there so other void scent can do the job. They both would have been long dead had Nero not protected them, something he makes sure to remind you that he only did for his own reasons. Unai wakes up, and seeing you there, she believes that they still have a chance to complete the mission and break the contract linking the cloud to your world. Of course, the cloud is having none of that, and she lashes out. You couldn't possibly hope to kill her in her world, but she's struggling to hold her form together after your battle, which makes the clone think this is their best chance to break the covenant. But you all have to leave now, because once that link is severed, the bridge linking the world of darkness to the Crystal Tower will vanish. Graha pleads with the clones to come with you because they are the only ones who can shut down the tower, and while he's talking, the cloud shoots him, only to discover that she can't hurt him either. The reason he has the Allagan eye is because he is a direct descendant of not just any Allagan bloodline, but Xande's very own, which means he can use the Crystal Tower too. The clones believe that in an attempt to keep the Allagan bloodline alive, someone must have implanted their gifts into Graha's ancestors. The Crystal Tower won't recognize him as Allagan because his blood is so diluted, but the clones share their own power with him so he will have full access to the tower. When the transfer is complete, both of Graha's eyes turn red, allowing his Allagan nature to be fully revealed. Not wanting to die, you, Nero, and Graha sprint away, while Unai and Doga stay behind to finish their mission. The gate is closing as you all race across the bridge, but the corruption in Nero's body makes it hard for him to keep up. He tells you to leave him, and after hearing a voice saying that the Crystal Tower needs to once again become a beacon of hope for mankind, you leave Nero behind. The clones manage to break the covenant, which also frees Nero from the corruption, and although the gate is nearly closed when he reaches it, Cid reaches through and pulls Nero out in the nick of time. Everyone's happy to see that you made it back, but they're sad to hear about the fate of the clones. Fortunately, Graha can seal the tower, although he needs a moment to rest first. He decides to hang back in the tower for a moment while you all head back to camp. Back at the camp, while you're all discussing the series of events you just went through, a member of the Sons of St. Cornoc come running up, screaming about how Graha ordered them all out of the tower. He's acting strange, so you all rush back to see what's gotten into him. He stops you as you get closer, warning you that the door to the tower has already started to close, and he's staying inside, as he finally understands his purpose. After Xande caused the calamity, survivors stood in the ruins looking for the tower, but it was gone. However, they prayed that it would return to them since it had become a beacon of hope for their people. The last member of the royal line who had survived the destruction, Princess Selena, heard their cries, so she used her resources to implant her blood and memories into Graha Tia's ancestor, so that one day, one of them could return the tower to its former glory. Unai and Doga giving him their blood also gave him the memories of his ancestor, and he plans on fulfilling their dream of making the tower a beacon of hope to the world as it was in ancient times. But as the world is now, the tower's powers are far too advanced, and people trying to use it without having the knowledge of the most basic Allagan tech could be disastrous. But if they wait for the world to catch up, then the Allagan bloodline may be long dead and the tower would be useless, which is why Graha decided to stay inside of the tower. Knowing what he knows now, he can put the tower to sleep like Amon did, and he will remain inside, immortal, until the day someone figures out how to open the door. Then and only then will he share the knowledge and power of the tower with the world. While you all hate to lose your friend, you know that he's right. As the gates seal, Sid and the others vow to catch up to Alad quickly so you can all be reunited. But until then, many adventures await you, on this world and on others. This concludes the story of the Crystal Tower. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. At the Marauders Guild in Limsa Mensa, where the Warrior of Light was a member, the Guildmaster Wernzone, one of the many Roganin who have names that come from randomly slapping your keyboard, has been waiting for you. He has a mission that's only suitable for the best member of the guild, which is you. A friend of his who's been working as a guard out in Costa del Sol needs some reinforcements because the fighting out there has gotten pretty heavy. The fact that he's asking for help means a lot since the man's no slouch with an axe. He's already sent Soquib out there to take care of the injured, so she'll let you know what's going on when you get there. The fighting turns out to not be what you'd expect. A very large pack of very large turtles are attacking everyone and everything in the area, and their massive numbers have overwhelmed the guards. Your mission is to figure out what's causing them to swarm, and of course to deal with it, so you head to the northern shore where you and Soquib see a seemingly feral red-eyed axe-wielding Roganin who roars, causing a swarm of massive turtles to charge the shore. You won't be able to track the man down until you deal with the critters, so the two of you get to work cutting down their numbers. There's too many of them for even the two of you to take down, but a very big, oddly armored, axe-wielding Roganin jumps in and helps the two of you cut the herd down. When the fighting's done, the man introduces himself as Curious Gorge before promising to kill you in a very brutal way if you make fun of his name. When he hears that you're members of the Marauders Guild and not just some common guards, he gets a bit more respect for you, and after seeing how well you use your axe, he offers to help you unleash the power of your inner beast as a warrior. When he mentions you becoming a warrior, Soquib actually gets kind of excited because she thought those ancient battle techniques were lost. They may have disappeared where she's from, but Curious Gorge and his tribe have been passing down those techniques for thousands of years, but their numbers are going down, which is why he came to your lands. He's out recruiting worthy candidates to learn the arts, and he thinks you'd make a good student, but he's not going to force you to join. He tells you to meet him at the Hidden Falls if you decide to take him up on his offer, and he leaves. Since it's such a rare opportunity, Soquib thinks you should take it, and as for Curious Gorge, she remembers hearing about a young marauder who had been a part of the company of heroes, and he fought with techniques that no one else in the company had seen before. When the group disbanded, he disappeared, and she wonders if Gorge is that same man. Either way, she knows that if she were you, she'd go to see what the man could teach. Naturally, the Warrior of Light heads off to see just what Gorge means about taming your inner beast. Curious Gorge knew you'd come. No one with your battle prowess would pass up the opportunity to learn better ways to hurt people, and you've already proven yourself worthy of a warrior soul crystal that's filled with the recorded history and skills of thousands of warriors. Those crystals have been passed on for generations to help guide people down the path of the warrior. Even more than that, once your inner beast awakens, the runes in the crystal will make you even stronger. More power always makes the Warrior of Light happy, and the fact that Gorge has found a worthy student to pass on the techniques to makes him happy too. So this is a win-win for both of you, more so for Gorge than you since he really hadn't expected to find a student since he left home before his own training was even complete. He brought some books with him that have the ancient knowledge of warrior techniques of the past, but he can't decipher them all. His brother can though, and he had left the village before Gorge to try and pass on the warrior techniques too, so Gorge needs to find him before he can really teach you some of the more deadly warrior techniques. He had been trying to translate the books while he searched for his brother, but a friend of his from back in the day when he was in the company of heroes had asked him to do him a favor, and he's been traveling all over the place looking for a feral beast that's been terrorizing the local villages. The thing just showed up out of nowhere, and from what people say, is super violent. Hunting that thing hasn't left Gorge with all that much time to read. He did translate a part that talked about an ancient set of armor that was forged in the fires of the Seven Hells and marked with the same runes as the warrior's soul crystal. The armor was passed down from hero to apprentice for centuries until one man threw all 5 pieces off of a mountain. No one has found the armor since. The books seem to have a bit of info on where the armor might be, but that'll take time to figure out. It'd be easier with his brother, but Gorge hasn't gotten any leads on him either. But now he does have a bit of training for you to do. There's a massive sandworm out in the Sagoli Desert that won't go down to any regular old axe swings. You'll have to call on the savage strength of your inner beast to be strong enough to bring it down. But first you'll need to find it, and for that you'll have to talk to the U tribe that lives out in the Forgotten Springs, since they keep tabs on the creature's movements. The members of the tribe that you talk to have seen the giant worm, and they think it's a horrible idea for you to go and mess with it. But on the quest for power, common sense is a weakness, so the Warrior of Light chooses not to use his, and goes to fight this thing. He kills it, completing his mission, and heads back to Gorge to let him know. The man's impressed by the fact that you were strong enough to take down the creature, but he's a little irritated with himself since he's spending all of his time reading and not honing his own skills. But he has been learning some interesting stuff, like why his clan was shunned by the outside world. After seeing how good his people were with an axe, the city-states started to add in the warrior techniques into their own training so they could call on their own inner beasts. It worked, and the soldiers became nearly unstoppable, but they also became feral and would attack any and everyone they saw. The leaders of the city-states blamed Gorge's tribe for this, and they banned the warrior arts and arrested anyone that they thought was teaching it. The odd thing is, Gorge's brother had never mentioned their people's dark history, and he's never seen any of his tribesmen go feral while drawing out their inner beast, so it makes him wonder if the ancient books might be wrong. It's even possible that they were written by one of his tribe's enemies. True or not, those stories ruined his tribe's reputation, and Gorge plans on doing something about it. That'll have to be done a little bit later though, because the fell creature that he was after has minions that have attacked Wineport, and Gorge figures that if the two of you deal with the things, the people there will see that the warriors aren't something to be scared of and are actually valuable allies. It's a start, so the two of you head off to offer your help to the militia. The captain says they're way outmatched by the animals in their never-ending assaults, so they'll definitely appreciate your help. The two of you split up to fill in the gaps in the city's defenses, and after you deal with your side, you hear screams coming from inside of the village, so you head in to help deal with any of the creatures that made it through. Gorge is already there, and he takes down the stragglers without them hurting anyone, but when a warrior draws on the strength of his inner beast, their eyes glow red and a little girl screams out that Gorge is a monster, which doesn't sit well with him, and he leaves looking depressed. The commander of the militia doesn't understand why Gorge left looking sad. While he fought like a demon, the people aren't actually scared of him. The captain will make sure of that, and he wants you to let Gorge know too. Gorge understands why the girl was scared. Even though he was in control, a big axe-wielding red-eyed giant is a pretty scary thing to see. That look could be what caused people to be scared of his tribe in the first place and not necessarily anything that they did, but Gorge won't know for sure until he does a bit more research. He did notice that your soul crystal is glowing, which means it probably has more knowledge to share with you. Apparently his hasn't glowed in a while, and he doesn't actually know why. After studying the old books some more, curious Gorge finds some clues to where the lost armor of his ancestors might actually be. Apparently after the hero had thrown the armor off of a cliff, 5 of his students went to find it so they could restore their master's good name. They managed to find the armor, but when they tried to hand the pieces over, the power of the armor drew them in, and none of them wanted to let go of their piece. They realized that if each individual piece had the power to warp a mind, putting all of them together would do unimaginable damage, so they decided to keep them separate. They went on and lived their lives, but when they got old, they went back to the spot where they achieved their greatest victories and buried their pieces of the armor to make sure no single warrior found them all, and the pieces should still be there now. The armor Gorge is wearing is a replica of the ancient armor minus the arcane enchantments that give it its power. Now if you bring all 5 pieces of the armor together, it could corrupt the person wearing it, but Curious Gorge thinks that if the full set of armor's runes are painted onto each and every warrior's armor, that should give them all the same strength level, so none of them will get drunk on their own power. That just sounds like a good way to make an army of feral warriors to wreak havoc on the world, but maybe that's just what I think. The Warrior of Light apparently doesn't think the same because he agrees, and the two of them split up to go and track down the pieces. After spending a lot of gil teleporting all over the place, the Warrior of Light finds his 3 pieces and heads back to Gorge, who can see the power of the armor you found resonating with your soul crystal. He had found one of the pieces himself, but when he put it on, he didn't feel anything, and he's not exactly sure why. While he tries to figure out why he didn't feel anything from the armor, he sends you to get another piece that's not far away. By the time you make it back with piece number 4, he's figured out why the armor didn't work for him. The armor draws its power from the runes and the inner beast of the wearer working together, but ever since the incident in Wineport, Gorge's soul crystal hasn't glowed at all. It's like he's lost his connection to it. If what he read in the old tomes is to be believed, if someone puts on that armor with a weak soul, their power will consume them and make them turn into mindless monsters that will lose themselves permanently. The only way to fix them is to kill them. He thinks the armor knew that would have happened to him, so it shut itself down to keep him from going feral. Which is good since he didn't actually want to die. He also had decided to leave the last piece of armor where it was. Considering the fact that the breastplate is the most powerful piece, it's the most dangerous, and since he's not really in control of his abilities, he didn't think carrying it around was the best idea. He doesn't even know if you should go and get it, but if you feel like you can handle it, he'll tell you where it is. Since when has the Warrior of Light ever shied away from new gear even when it was dangerous to get? Of course he wants it. So Gorge tells him where it is, but he also warns you that if you feel even a little odd, you need to throw the armor away, preferably off of a high cliff. He's trying to fix the image of the warriors, and having you go feral and start killing folks isn't the best way to do it. The breastplate is out in Kurthus, and Gorge decides that he won't go with you to get it, but he must have changed his mind, because after you find it, he shows up and takes it from you. Despite what he said, he can't bring himself to trust an outsider with the fate of his tribe. If you can't control it, you'll ruin everything, and he just can't risk it. He knows you might feel slighted, but he had to do what he had to do. And of course, he doesn't plan on putting the armor on either, not until he's ready. But that'll have to wait. Apparently the monster that Gorge has been hunting for has been seen around Wineport, and from what the people say, it's actually a man, which makes all of this even worse. But it does give Gorge a chance to show the people of Wineport that he's not a monster, so the two of you make your way back there. The militia captain is happy to see the two of you, since more fell creatures are attacking the town like something's drawing them to it. Gorge wants you to handle the creatures while he deals with the beast itself. Taking down the regular creatures is nothing, so once you're done, you head into the town to finally see that the so-called beast is another Rogadan. Not only that, it's Gorge's brother, who has apparently been consumed by the warrior's madness and is going on a rampage that is not helping with fixing the image of their tribe. Gorge tries to talk his brother down, but that doesn't work, so he proceeds to beat the crap out of him for tarnishing their image. During the fight, he loses himself as well and turns on you, demanding that you give him the armor. You can either give it to him or he'll kill you, so naturally you take option 3 and beat him until he calms down. Once he regains his senses, he admits that he had known all along that his brother had snapped, but he tried to deny it. He figured that if he could show that he was the stronger warrior, everyone would see that his brother had been corrupted because he was weak, not because of any inherent flaws in their tribe. But since the same thing happened to him, he has to accept that his tribe is flawed. They lost their focus on who they were, and their quest for strength at all costs actually made them weaker. Their power was fueled by rage, and that caused them to lose control. But it was different for the Warrior of Light. He could draw on his rage for strength when it was needed, then shut it off, which lets him control the power of the beast within. Gorge believes that's how the warriors of old were, but their anger at being shunned by the outsiders made them lose that. That's probably why the Soul Crystal chose you. It knew that you embodied the mindset of the warriors of the past, and would be a good person to help bring their order back. Now that Gorge has figured this out, he'll have to start his training over, and this time he'll do it with his brother. It'll take a while, but he'll never forget the help you've given to him, and neither will the people of Wineport. This concludes the first part of the warrior storyline. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys, later.